soldiers greet their emperor. They ask to see the emperor who brought the invaders to their knees, the emperor who crushed the traitors, the emperor who defeated the infidels. They are great defenders of the faith, great defenders of the Messiah, and they have crossed oceans, mountains, and deserts to conquer 3 continents. They are the great heroes of Lemuria. This noble man's name is Hercules, the supreme emperor of the 3 continents. Emperor of divine light, Hercules the First. Once upon a time there was an emperor who turned the dying Lemurian Empire into a great power spanning 3 continents. And today we will be proud to tell the story of the heroism of Emperor Hercules I, ruler of 3 continents, emperor of the divine color. The territory of Lemuria. The boy rides on a horse and shouts that he does not want to be an emperor ever. He is Hercules, the 3rd prince of the weak, dying empire of Lemuria. Due to the death of his father, the late Emperor Hadrian Roman III, the position of emperor became vacant. Originally, he should not have been allowed as the heir to the throne, but since his 2 brothers were very poorly brought up and were not suitable for the role of heirs, now he is forced to take the place of the next emperor. The idea of being the emperor of a small, weak country, let alone a great one, is more unbearable to him than any form of torture. Because of his stupid brothers, he is now forced to become the emperor of a country that may soon be destroyed. The young man shouts that he wants to live a quiet and unhurried life for the rest of his life. The girl who follows him on her horse asks Hercules not to be selfish. Hearing this voice, Hercules realizes that they have already caught up with him, and this is Caroline. She's his childhood friend, and she's used to always keeping an eye on him. Hercules would never have thought that she would go so far as to catch him. She asks why he is running away. Hercules is indignant that she is still running after him. Caroline replies that, of course, if she doesn't run after him, she won't catch him. She demands that he stop running away and become the emperor. Hercules replies that he has no intention of becoming emperor of a weak and empty country that will soon be destroyed. Caroline catches up with him, grabs him by the scruff of the neck, and pulls him off his horse. He's falling. Caroline sits on top of him and announces that she has caught him. Hercules is angry. Previously, the Lemurian Empire had a territory that spanned 3 continents and was the world's greatest military, economic, and cultural power, leaving its mark on the world, leaving its mark. This empire was built by the elves. But this country, once hailed as the most powerful state in the world, was divided by civil war into East and West, and the western half of the country was destroyed. The Eastern Lemurian Empire also continues to decline as a result of invasions by various races. A territory that has lost 60% of its holdings and is still in decline. And trade in the country, which is deprived of many grain lands and access to the sea, is becoming almost impossible, while the deficit is only growing. He was chosen as the next emperor of such a problematic and weak empire. Maybe that's the reason. He remembers the emperor asking how he was doing and how he was doing. The young man replies that thanks to the efforts of His Majesty, everything is going well. This is the 19th emperor of the Lemurian Empire, Hadrian Roman III. If all goes well, the country will not go hungry this year. The emperor asks his forgiveness for these difficulties. He asks Hercules how he is doing. He says that they live on very large lands, and it is he who will decide how this country will develop in the future. At the age of 4, Hercules reads a book, and the emperor offers him a tour of these lands, and he can finish reading the book later. But the boy turns out to be. He says it's just a wheat field, but he'd rather read a book. But the emperor snatches the book from Hercules and explains that whoever wrote this book saw the world as it is. This book captures this world, but just reading the book, he will not be able to experience the same emotions as in life. Suddenly Hercules sees 2 children sitting down, doing something. Hercules asks what they are doing. The father replies that they gather wheat from the ears of corn, so that they can then make bread from them, which they eat. Hercules notices that it doesn't seem comfortable to use, but how about using something like a comb instead of sticks? The emperor considers the offer. Soon a similar device is made. Workers are cleaning the grain from the ears of corn. They are delighted that it is so simple and their hands do not get tired at all. They can grind several ears of corn at once. Instead of relying on the strength of one hand, The fetus is much easier to pull with both hands, relying on its own weight. And if you make a small platform, even small children can do this. This will save them a lot of effort and significantly increase productivity. The emperor praises him and says it's great, asks how he knew about it. He explains that they have existed since the Edo period and were created by farmers who were creating various innovative tools at that time. The emperor asks what he meant by the word Edo, but Hercules says he didn't mean anything by it. He read about it in a foreign book. The emperor says that he understands everything. His son is a know-it-all. Hercules thinks that there is no such book in the library or in the archive, but he has a secret. He has knowledge of more advanced science and technology, which he keeps secret. People often call him a prodigy, and his father gave him everything he ever asked for. But it is because of this knowledge that he loses his freedom and is greatly overrated. Caroline, sitting on the lap of a recumbent Hercules, demands that he finally become emperor. Hercules asks her to get down first, because she is heavy. She's afraid that if she gets off, he'll run away again. She demands that he become an emperor, because he has the knowledge and abilities to be one. But Hercules refuses. He says he wants to travel when he grows up. That's why he is now just accumulating knowledge. He is not going to become a slave of this country. He demands that she already get off of him. He won't be the imprisoned emperor. She says it means he doesn't want to be with her. He explains that he loves and wants to protect the country where his father, Emperor Hadrian, ruled and has always wanted to see the new Lemurian Empire created by Hercules. Caroline starts to cry. She says she wants to see Hercules become emperor. Hercules asks why she is crying. Hercules knows that he will have to agree. In the end, he agrees and says that he will take Caroline on a trip with him. She asks again if this is true. Hercules assures her that it is true and promises to do whatever she wants for her. She asks if he will let her read a book about martial arts that his mother forbade her to read. Hercules allows it. Caroline asks if he will come for tea. Hercules promises to come. And at the end, she asks if he will become emperor. Hercules says he will, and only then does he realize what he has said. She grabs his shirt and pulls him along. Hercules asks her what she's doing. Carolina explains that a warrior must use any weapon to win. That's what his father said. Hercules is outraged that she deceived him. Thus, in the presence of his subjects, he safely ascended the throne and became emperor. Hercules sits on a throne in a palace and thinks it all sucks to be stuck in a country like this. A continuing trade deficit, territory that continues to shrink due to the invasion of other races, causing their nation to continue to lose its territorial viability. He can't believe that his father died ruling such a country. His freedom lasted so little, and so his imperial life began. A hand appears on his shoulders. A demoness appears behind him, reminding him that she told him that he was destined to become an emperor. She has given him a lot of knowledge about the other world, so she hopes that he will succeed. Yes, he has a lot of knowledge from another world, but it wasn't originally his. The person who owns this knowledge was born and raised on the planet Earth in a country called Japan. I think his name is Sararia Shichi. In short, all the problems that have arisen so far, he was only able to solve because he has knowledge from another world. The reason for all this is the work this bizarre demoness. He asks her if she has any idea how long it's been causing him a headache. In another life, he was such a boring and stupid person, but still, knowledge is definitely useful. The demoness says that she has high hopes for him, because he is a future great hero, and disappears. Hercules is left alone. He clutches his head and thinks that he is bursting with the desire to abdicate. Hercules' uncle Christopher Augustus comes to see him. He grins and says that he doesn't look like a man who has just ascended to the throne. Hercules asks if he is related to him, even though he doesn't look like a member of his family at all. Anyway, he was probably the one who suggested the idea to my father. Even though he had 2 brothers, he put him above them, so he doesn't remember doing anything specific, but Adrian talked a lot about him. He could speak at 2, and at 3 he could read and write, and at 4 he had read all the books in the castle, and that was not enough for him. And he was very happy, saying that Hercules studied martial arts one after another, without getting tired at all. Hercules asks him to shut up. Christopher continues that, in addition, He has heard that he invented sembakoki, thereby increasing the efficiency of wheat harvesting, and since then their wheat production has been growing exponentially. The people and the former emperor are very happy with him. In any case, his accession to the throne, as he believes, was the right decision. Hercules dreams of being rebelled against. The doors open. Caroline's father, Galphys Galinos, enters. This is a man who is going to revolutionize the atmosphere. Christopher turns to him and tells him that his timing is really bad. Galphys asks for his forgiveness, but from now on they need to discuss issues related to the management of the empire together. Hercules clutches his head, realizing now who Caroline is taking after. The patriarch of New Lemuria, Lucanos, laughs and asks Hercules not to say that, because he is always like this. Christopher is surprised that Lucanos is here, and he asks if he's been here all this time. He tells Hercules that he is terrible. A relative on his mother's side, a soldier, a eunuch, and a 12-year-old emperor. This country is doomed. Hercules tells them that they can continue playing politics on their own, and he'll just have fun in the library while everything goes to hell. He takes off his crown. Lucanos says it can't be helped. They'll have to rely on Lady Caroline again. Hercules goes to the library. He was born in a terrible world to become the emperor of a dying country. He imagines that millions of people are hoping for him to save their country. Hercules sits among the books and thinks that they are the only ones who give quiet peace and rest. There is a lot of knowledge waiting for him outside of this castle, but only they will help him learn his true nature. The best partner to get him out of this tight world. Opening the book, asks what kind of world they will offer him today. The door opens and Caroline runs into the library, screaming. Hercules gets angry and asks why she came. Ta says he's stuck here again. She'd heard that he was skipping work. Hercules realizes that they have told Caroline everything. He says that since there are already so many people here, he doesn't have to go into politics, especially since he doesn't force them. Just the title of emperor is enough for him. Caroline asks if he doesn't know anything about politics. Hercules asks her what she said. Caroline replies that she feels sorry for him. Even though he was recognized as Adrian, it's still a shame. She thought that Hercules could solve the country's financial problems in an instant. She must have made a mistake. Still, Hercules is only 12 years old, and what would his father think if he heard him? Hercules is angry. He asks her if she thinks he's a child. Of course, he understands politics, which is why he has so much knowledge about the world. It will be easy enough once he fully understands what the problem is. Carolina clarifies that he can't do it now. Hercules agrees, and if she insists, he will within 5, or better yet 3 years. In return, Caroline must fulfill one of his requests, if he really solves all the problems. She hesitates, but then agrees and says that she will do whatever he asks. Hercules clarifies that she herself agreed. Current state of the empire. Loss of territories. Loss of 60% of the territory of grain fields. See territories from the old capital of Lemuria. Deterioration of the tax system. Reduced tax collection by 40%. Critical budget tax deficit. $12 million 1 million gold coin taxes. Increased military spending. 70% of total revenue. Foreign threats. The northern nomadic kingdom. The southwestern heretical kingdom of Keld. The western pagan kingdom of Furs. Religious issues. Separation of state religion. Presence of pagans. Improved relations with the Lemurian Patriarchate. Gold outflow due to excessive trade imports. Outflow of national wealth. New Lemuria, the capital of the Lemurian Empire. Better known as the city where 2/3 of the world's wealth is located. The empire has accumulated great wealth from the transportation of goods through its territory. The empire's prosperity, sustained over the years, is supported by transit trade, aided by its favorable location. However, transit trade has 2 disadvantages. The first one depends on the political situation and economic conditions of import and export at the destination. And the second, in this case, all the wealth will inevitably flow through the neighboring country, namely the main enemy of the greatest empire, the Kingdom of Furs. Hercules is in the library. He studies the books and understands that this means that the Lemurian Empire needs to find another source of income that does not depend on transit trade. His subjects are finally happy that he is motivated. Christopher is glad that their majesty finally made up his mind. He's the real emperor now. They can prevent the destruction of the Lemurian Empire. Hercules sighs and thinks that he hasn't done anything yet. Caroline's father pats her on the head and praises her. She had just told him that Hercules had promised to improve the country's financial situation within 3 years. He remembers what he said and thinks he's a fool, but now there's nothing he can do. The patriarch asks him if it's not a crazy idea to improve his financial situation in 3 years. He replies that maybe this is the case, so they will start with an easy export of the product. With the exception of wheat, which is the main food product of the empire, grapes and olives are also grown here. Grapes and olives are processed into the empire's main export commodities, wine and olive oil. As for handicraft production, the empire produces high-quality glass and ceramics. These are the main export and financial resources of the empire, but these goods are produced by all countries of the world, and the handicraft industry of the Kingdom of Furs is developing no worse than the Lemurian Empire. Because of competition with them, they practically do not make a profit. So, in order to start rebuilding their finances, he is thinking of creating a special Lemuria product. This special product, he pauses. Just then, the door opens and a maid brings in a cart with a tea set on it. She pours the drink into the cups. Hercules points to the steaming bowl and says that's what he is. Everyone looks into the cups and says there's something black in them. He drinks it and asks the others not to hold back, because it's just been made. No one dares to take the cup, but Hercules asks them to try it anyway. Everyone picks up their cups and tries the strange drink. Christopher notices that he has a strange smell. They keep drinking it. Galfes doesn't like him at all. The patriarch says that he feels cheerful and likes it. Caroline asks if it's some kind of medicine. It's too bitter. Hercules says that he understands and offers to try it like this. He adds milk and sugar to her cup. When he pours the cream, he pours it in the form of a picture of a kitten. Caroline looks at the cup. She is surprised and delighted. Hercules says that he added cream to the rest of the mugs and asks you to try it now. They drink the drink again. Christopher notices that it's easier to drink now, and the patriarch says that he liked the one that was before. Carolina says it's delicious. Hercules says that this drink is coffee. Caroline repeats the word and asks her father if he knew about it. He replies that he has never heard of anything like it. Hercules says that he learned about this drink on a trip a few years ago. It was grown in the church so that the ministers could be in a state of vigor for a long time. There is little water source this country, and water that can be obtained is very difficult. This is why the main drinks in Lemuria are grape wine and beer, which can be stored for a long time. But if you drink them, you end up getting drunk. Aristocrats who have money drink tea imported from the East, but it is still very expensive because of the import. On the other hand, coffee is completely unavailable on the market, has no established production methods, and above all, it can be grown in the climate and soil quality of Lemuria. It was only natural that if they sold it as a special product of the empire, it would attract some attention. Christopher says he's got it all figured out. He agrees that this coffee should be sold as a special product, but he is not particularly impressed. Hercules asks what this means. Christopher explains, just to show them this drink. Hercules bought a tea set in one of the silk countries of the East. White porcelain that technically can only be produced in the silk lands of the East is very expensive, as he probably knows. Hercules asks if he talks about these in cups and informs that this porcelain was made in Lemuria. Everyone is surprised. The patriarch says it's impossible. Isn't such white porcelain a patent of the silk country of the East? Even the Furs Kingdom doesn't have such technology, let alone Lemuria. This bone china is made in London around the 18th century. Caroline asks what London is like. Hercules explains that one way or another, the white color of this porcelain is obtained from animal bones. What he means is that until now, all the porcelain they made was black, so he thought of replacing it with white. Actually, it is still in the experimental stage, but the white color is very beautiful. Christopher says it's already amazing. For a long time, he thought Lemuria was in a state of stagnation, but it turns out that it had such an exquisite technology. Galfes would never have thought that their majesty would show them something so amazing and so sudden. Hercules says that he had to pay quite a lot to get the craftsman who made this porcelain to make it as quickly as possible when he left the palace. However, it's still too far from perfect, and so far they don't have enough coffee to sell. First, they need to raise money and find artisans capable of making porcelain to start mass production. And the ministers of the church, they will force them to grow coffee on their territories. First, they will sell bone china and coffee to the aristocrats. They will definitely bring a good profit if they are sold in a set. They will sell coffee and bone china as special products of the empire. He asks the others if they are clear. They answer in the affirmative. Thanks to this, they have the hope of a small financial recovery, so they decide to start selling them. As long as they don't establish a monopoly on these products, then china and coffee will never change the situation. And if he manages to do this, then the financial situation of the empire will improve in at least 5 years, and he needs to improve it in 3 years. Now, all you have to do is dig through the administrative documents. In the castle, Hercules studies various books in the library, studies archives, draws something. 3 months after he started digging through the administrative documents, he finally figured out the problem. As he expected, increased military spending and a deterioration tax efficiency. The council meets. Hercules says that now that everyone is here, they can start. He for the sudden meeting, but thinks they need to take urgent action against the empire. Everyone at the table discusses whether this is normal, because he is only 12 years old. Hercules drinks coffee and says they should start. He turns to the man standing next to him, who is holding a paper in his hands. He asks who he is and says he hasn't seen him before. The man explains that his name is Kroll. Today, he will be responsible for all records. Hercules demands that Kroll explain their tax system. Thoth reports that the Imperial tax system consists of 6 main types of taxes: land, poll, trade, import tax, war tax, and slave emancipation tax. In addition, their state has a monopoly on salt. Hercules thanks him, thinks that he is doing well, and he should continue in the same spirit. Kroll is glad that His Majesty praised him. Hercules says that of the tax systems just mentioned, the poll tax, the trade tax, the import tax, the slave emancipation tax, and the salt monopoly should be abolished or revised. There's a commotion at the table. Counselors ask what he just said, how they will collect taxes if they are abolished. Hercules asks them to calm down and promises to explain everything to them now. First of all, the poll tax. It shows list of data about people in the empire from whom they collect poll tax. He asks Kroll to look at the list and tell him what he thinks. He looks at the list and says there are too many women on it. Hercules reports that he has hit the nail on the head. Moreover, there are too many people with disabilities there. The poll tax in the empire is higher for men than for women, and with physical disabilities. These reports are simple sheets of paper. A family of 4 men and 2 women can get tax benefits simply by writing down that there are 2 men and 4 women in their family. Someone shouts that there are 10 million people in this country. You can't check all the people. That's exactly why this happens. So Hercules says that since they can't verify it in any way, people have started attributing themselves to visual and hearing impairments and evading taxes in every possible way. And they succeed. They ask their advisors if they can say with complete confidence that this information is correct. It doesn't need a tax system that can't properly collect taxes, so it should be abolished. The table falls silent. Kroll thinks it's amazing. These noisy bureaucrats are now silent and can't say anything. Hercules turns to Kroll again, apologizes for asking many times, but asks to tell them how the trade tax is collected. Kroll explains that a merchant's tax rate is calculated based on their profit and product type. Hercules asks how they will know the exact amount of his sales revenue. Kroll replies that it is from the words of the merchant. Hercules says exactly that. That is, you can just lie. Traders are free to falsify the numbers. They can say one amount of income, but in reality it will be completely different. It is true that the tax levied on trade provides significant revenue. They must pay what they earn as a national obligation. That's why it's not going to change the trade tax policy, but given the labor, time, and manpower, they can't afford to do an unannounced inspection, so it should be reviewed. Then there is the import tax, which only hinders the flow of goods, bringing only a small income to the treasury. Next up is the slave emancipation tax. In their day, slaves are no longer freed. Why do they still have this dusty tax system? Hercules declares that both are cancelled. Kroll thinks that now 4 tax systems were abolished or sent for revision in the blink of an eye. Hercules continues. He says the salt monopoly is a policy that was adopted during the reign of the late Emperor Hadrian, which helped the empire secure a new source of revenue. And what the empire couldn't collect with a poll tax was offset by the sale of salt, sold at 30 times its normal price. Salt is necessary for people, so they bought it regardless of the cost. Hercules says it's very wonderful, but he found something here. The patriarch approaches him, holding a small bag of something on a tray. My advisors ask me what it is. Hercules offers to taste the contents of the bag to Caroline. She tries it. Hercules asks how she feels. She says it's just plain salt. Hercules reports that it is better and cheaper than monopolized salt. This illegal salt is much better than the monopolized salt of the empire. Moreover, it is sold all over the imperial capital at a fairly cheap price. The fact that this salt is sold on the streets means that there is someone quietly pulling the strings behind him. Someone claims that this is not the case. Hercules asks if they are making fun of his father's tax system. He asks if everyone here is buying the empire's monopolized salt. This can't be happening. The reaction of the bureaucrats shows that this is most likely the case. Do they all buy contraband salt? Hercules laughs and apologizes. Everyone looks at him in surprise. He says that obviously this system is unstable and bad in every sense, because it was invented only to compensate for the broken tax system. It is also being cancelled. In addition, he is ready to turn a blind eye to the issue of smuggled salt, but on one condition. Expert advisors specify which one. Hercules demands that the merchants form a trade union. Our advisors are not sure what it is. Hercules explains that when using traditional methods, it is obvious for merchants that they falsify the amount of income, and it is impossible to track what exactly they are doing. If they formed a union, the number of people who would have to check revenue would be reduced, and they could exercise cross-control between unions and merchants and between other unions, allowing the government to gain some degree of control over the economy through a union. One of the counselors says that he is afraid that if a trade union is created, it will lead to higher prices. If they set a price for one thing, doesn't the king think it will encourage others to raise their prices so that they can make a profit too? Hercules explains that as far as the price is concerned, they will set the highest price and get the merchants to do the same. One of the advisors says that many of them here believe that trading is a vile business, that money is earned not by buying and selling, but by thinking and thinking wisely. Hercules asks him how he even makes a living with such an idea. If there aren't many buyers, then they just need to combine merchants to figure out how to sell them. If you just suddenly raise the price of an item, no one will buy it, and it will rot. They also know that the merchants have formed their own alliance, although not officially, so they suggest using it to their advantage. So, Hercules states that he has invented a new tax system and would like them to contribute. Advisors are given leaflets with a new tax system. Everyone reads it. Hercules says there's no emperor or bureaucrats here right now. Right now, they are just a gathering of people who want to restore the Lemurian Empire and those who can do it. He suggests not to hesitate to challenge his decision. The council is quiet. Hercules says he actually thinks they are getting paid too little, so if they are successful with fiscal reforms, he will personally make sure that their salaries are fair. He suggests that they all try together. But there was something else he forgot to ask. He has questions. Thus, a heated debate began in the meeting room, which lasted for 3 days and nights. As a result, after numerous improvements and adjustments, a new system of taxation was finally created, which was promulgated throughout the empire. And 2 years later, after the new tax system was unveiled, the empire's tax revenues increased by about 1.5 times compared to 2 years earlier. And the use of taxes, such as the personnel costs of the imperial palace, has been revised to reduce the costs of the national treasury. In addition, all the treasures that were part of the imperial house's property and did not represent historical value were evenly sold. Thus, the treasury of the Lemurian Empire safely began to recover, and the new Emperor Hercules, at the age of 14, received firm support from merchants supporting the national logistics. Carolina says it's great. He would actually be able to solve the empire's financial problems in less than 3 years. Hercules says he knows, so he asks Caroline to pat him on the head. She agrees. Then she looks away, embarrassed. She asks him if he is sure that he wants to go out into the city. If he went to such a crowded place, it would definitely cause a ruckus. He says that everything is fine, because to Caroline he is still the same Hercules always was. And in the eyes of the rest of the world, he's not who they think he is. Caroline asks if they used any magic. Hercules asks her not to address him as Your Majesty. She declares that in any case, Hercules is not going to disguise himself with magic, leave the castle and skip official duties. He says that Christopher and the others will take care of it, and today he wants to introduce Caroline to the 4 sites Lemuria. She's surprised at how many of their attractions he's talking about. The first attraction he wanted to show here. He takes her to the art museum. She is surprised that there are so many art objects here. She asks what kind of place it is. He explains that this is a museum, he built it. Caroline is surprised, and Hercules explains. He asks her if she remembers when they opened the warehouse during the financial control. At that time, he was going to sell some surplus artwork to replenish the treasury. But there were a lot of things with high historical value and things that were too wasteful to sell, but he would be cursed if he sold them. There were so many of them that they decided to put them on display here. Caroline looks at one of the vases and asks if this vase was stored in the national warehouse. He explains that this is the private property of an aristocrat. Initially, it was planned to display art objects only from the castle, but the aristocrats insisted that they also want to show their wealth. They will charge them a seat fee and charge visitors an entrance fee. This way, they will earn a whole lot of money. Caroline looks at a statue and sneer. Hercules thinks this is not the reaction he expected. He hears the voice of the demoness, who explains that it is true, women are not interested in male bragging. He mentally asks her not to show up out of the blue, and the demoness says that she is just giving him advice. Caroline may already be able to think like other people, but it seems that she has not yet grown up to love art. Maybe he should use something simpler. Hercules thinks about it. Then they go to the next location. The next attraction is the street market. He used to come here often. At the market, citizens sell all kinds of goods. Caroline is surprised that it is very lively here. She had never been to such a place before. Ever since Lemuria was the capital of 2/3 of the world's wealth, there are still a lot of different products on the shelves here. In fact, since they had nothing to attract people with, they decided to build a museum right next to the market. But on the other hand, this way they attract people to go to the market and buy different goods. There are also artisans here, so they can even make a souvenir with her name and date on it, although it is not a currency. Carolina solves such coins. She is delighted and says that it turns out that this place has become so lively thanks to Hercules. He hands her a necklace and asks how about this. Hercules says that Caroline's eyes are like rubies. No, even more beautiful than rubies. Caroline claims to be flattered. Hercules suggests that if she likes something, let him know. He will buy it for her. She thinks it's too much. She doesn't need anything. Ever since she was born into the Galanos family, her military father only taught her martial arts to protect Hercules. She's sure that she wouldn't look very good with any of these necklaces if he gave her one. Hercules is surprised that she doesn't want a reward from the emperor. She says that's not what she wanted to say. Hercules laughs and asks why she shouldn't just accept him. He just wants to give it to her. Carolina is very beautiful, and she will look good in anything. She is embarrassed, says that he is teasing her again. Hercules agrees and confirms that this is exactly the case. They choose a necklace. Hercules asks if there's something she likes. But the girl leaves and says that she doesn't like anything here. Given the way things are going, Hercules is hesitant to show her the aqueduct under construction. Then it knows what to do. They go to chariot races. Caroline is delighted. She admits that she really wanted to visit here. Hercules just thought that Caroline might like chariot racing. She agrees and says that just like everyone else. Chariot racing is a test of the bond of trust between rider and horse. Horse vs. horse, man vs. man in a heated battle for speed. She is sure that there is no one who would not like it, especially the cool quadrigar red Hercules. He is a very popular jockey who has won many races since his debut. He's a very popular jockey. The race ends. Carolina regrets that today's race is over. Trumpets are playing on the walls. The manager announces another race. Caroline is very surprised that it is her father. The race starts again. Caroline is surprised. She doesn't understand what is going on. They decided from the very beginning to hold 2 races. She thought that there was only 1 gate. Hercules explains that they added another gate when they rebuilt the stadium. This stadium has been in financial difficulties for a long time, and so far it has suffered from a lack of maintenance, so they decided to rebuild it according to a new project. Cheaper to rebuild and repair it. Carolina is happy to see that famous jockey Red Comet Chanitas. She shouts at him to go ahead and asks him not to lose. Carolina says she can't believe she's actually seeing him live. Hercules thinks that if only she knew a little more about what he did. Carolina is rooting for her favorite racer. Hercules thinks that's a good thing, too. After the race, Carolina says it was great. She can't believe he went for it at the last minute. Red Comet has fully lived up to his name. Hercules tells her that she completely forgot about him in the middle of the race. Carolina apologizes and says that she is very sorry. Hercules knows it's getting late, but he asks if she wants to take a walk to the last place. Caroline asks where they should go. Hercules answers that to the sea. He, seeing her surprised face, asks what's the matter. Isn't the sea a classic place for walking and dating? Caroline says she's never heard of it. The sea is the place where Lemuria's sewage runs out. It's the worst place you can ever go. Stinking, dirty, and just plain disgusting. Hercules thinks that this is true, because such places for dating were chosen in that world. He smiles and says it's okay, but she resists. He tries to convince her that everything is fine, brings her to the seashore, and tells her that they have come. She opens her eyes and sees a magnificent picture. They descend into the harbor. Carolina is surprised that there is no garbage at all. The water is clean and does not stink. The harbor used to be full of fish waste, but now it's very clean. Hercules explains that this is all due to the law. Until now, all the sewage and garbage of New Lemuria has been discharged into the sea. That's why the harbor was very garbage-filled, and sometimes it caused an epidemic. So he built a sewage treatment plant to remedy this situation. With the help of it, sewage in New Lemuria passes through a large series of filters before being released into the sea. There is also now a law against littering. He is also going to create a new position that will be responsible for garbage collection and cleaning. And in order not to litter the territory near the capital, he decided to throw out all the garbage somewhere far away from the capital. Carolina can't believe he went to all this trouble and came up with a law to clean up all the trash. Is this really necessary? He says he needs it. He goes up to Caroline and kisses the top of her head and tells her that it suits her very well. He says that since he's going on a date with someone he likes, it would be nice if the streets were clean. He puts the pendant on her. He looks at the pendant around her neck and says that the blue stone looks good against her red hair. She is surprised that this is the necklace that she liked at the market. Hercules reports that he thought she liked it when he was watching her. He says it suits her very well. Caroline thanks him. Hercules states that he wants her to do the same. He wants her to kiss his cheek in gratitude, because he's worked really hard so far. Thanks to his policies, the sea was so beautiful, and Caroline said she would do anything he asked of her. He didn't want to ask for too much, but wasn't it too early for Caroline to ask for a kiss? Caroline stands on tiptoe, kisses him on the cheek, and tells him that he did a good job. Hercules thanks her, too. The demoness appears again, saying that it has become very hot. He demands that she stop talking. At the castle, Galfy says he hasn't seen His Majesty today. Christopher explains that he has a date with Lady Caroline today. The patriarch is surprised if it's really a date. It's nice, isn't it, to be interested in a girl? Galfy says he feels bad when she says that. His Majesty, who initially didn't show any initiative in his duties and was idle, had worked very hard until today. So he thinks it's normal that he just wanted to take a break from everything right now, because there might be a war coming soon. Hercules and Caroline are admiring the sea at this time. Christopher reports that there was some strange activity on the Personia Peninsula. At the moment, there is no exact proof, but they cannot leave everything as it is. Something must be done before things take a problematic turn. Galfes thinks we should discuss everything with His Majesty. Christopher informs me that he will go first. But Galfes calls him a smartass and says he's only getting in the way. They enter the room at the same time and ask if they can borrow some of their Majesty's time. Meanwhile, Galfes is lying on the couch with his head in Caroline's lap. She asks if it would be more convenient for him to sit down and read. Meanwhile, Galfes and Christopher are shouting for his attention. They don't get along, but they share a common loyalty to the state. Hercules asks if he understood correctly that they want to expand their troops. Oba says yes, but Christopher thinks you should start with sea wax, and Galfes thinks you should start with the army. Hercules snuggles up in Carolina and says these old geezers scare him. Jokes aside, last year most of their increased army of profits was spent on state-owned enterprises. Water irrigation, reconstruction of military routes, construction of aqueducts, improvement of public health, and so on. If they don't strengthen the foundation of the state, it will be impossible to expand the army. The morale of the population should be appropriate, but he himself planned to increase the military budget at the beginning of the year. He planned this, but there is one thing. Galfes asks what the but is. Hercules explains that the army of this country is too weak and incredibly not organized for perestroika. Regardless of the differences between the races that are bound by the peace treaty, they can simply ignore it and start slowly raising funds themselves. He understands that they should strengthen their military forces, but their army is absolutely super weak. Christopher says that even with his words, they noticed a strange movement in the outskirts. He says that if they are talking about the Personia Peninsula, then he already knows. The suspicious and unregistered wheat and iron guild deals have already been confirmed. In addition, consumers of merchants and intermediaries everywhere communicate about the abnormal growth in the number of mercenaries who come to them. And when he traced the source of all the changes, he realized that they were all related to the island of Personia. Those guys from Personia, he'll bet they think that as long as some kid takes the throne, they'll beat us. They have no idea about personal conflicts. Hercules thinks it's vain. Obviously, they'll be attacked sooner or later. In fact, expanding this weak army will be a waste of money. Carolina regrets that everything is very difficult. Hercules says that if the army of the Lemurian Empire becomes stronger, he promises to reward Galfes and Christopher. It demands immediate action and calls a strategic conference. They both agree with him. Christopher says it turned out to be very simple, and Galfes is happy that everything is as expected from his daughter. They still have money after the financial reform. At the moment, the army of the Lemuria Empire is about 20,000 heavy cavalry and longbowmen, totaling about 100 warships. The time has come to consider declaring war to seize the lands lost under the previous government. Hercules then asks Galfes and Christopher how many reinforcements they need. Galfes says that he would like to say that they still have enough cavalry, but he does not feel calm for them either. At least 10,000 infantry, but if he could ask for more, then 20,000. Hercules warns him not to ask for more. They can't afford it. He understands that it is hopeless. Hercules asks what's going on with the fleet. Christopher replies that he is still satisfied with the state of the naval forces, but many ships are at their limit, and they should be rebuilt. So if they cut spending on the army, then control of the sea will increase significantly. Hercules asks if he understands correctly that Christopher means to maintain the status quo. Galfes says they haven't had a naval battle in almost 20 years. Now they need an army. Christopher is outraged. He asks what he's talking about. If they lost control of the sea, they wouldn't be able to defend the Imperial capital. The fleet is more necessary. Galfes demands to strengthen the army. There's no need to bother with parasites. Their quarrel is not unfounded, because their troops really should be given a little more attention and money. The military forces of the Lemurian Empire are divided into two parts. An army led by Galfes and a fleet commanded by Christopher. Initially, Lemuria had a permanent force of 100,000 infantry. The cavalry was supplemented by recruits or mercenaries from the allied tribes. The main army was well trained and quickly adapted to any battlefield, which was the impetus to direct the expansion course of the Lemurian Empire. But the military strength fell after the collapse of the empire. When the previous Emperor Hadrian reigned, its numbers decreased significantly. As it turned out, he destroyed the infantry and formed an army based on heavy cavalry and archers, which were less flexible but used effectively in battle. Hercules thinks it would be wise to organize an army, using these soldiers as a sensitive substitute for horse troops. But still, during this period, the soldiers consisted of half peasants and half mercenaries of the allied tribes. And while there are poorly equipped men in the army who only yesterday held a plow, it is simply impossible to win. Hadrian kept losing men, and while they didn't have a chance to improve their capabilities, the number of fights they lost kept growing. Money continued to be wasted on purchases of expensive horses and armor, and soon the Lemurian Empire was mired in financial problems. That's how the state of the financial market came to its current dire situation. Caroline turns to their majesty and asks why they don't bring in mercenaries if putting together a main army is causing difficulties. Hercules ponders this, but thinks that the mercenaries will be a little difficult. Mercenaries are soldiers who live for money. Even the Habsburgs of Spain, who own colonies in South America, made a fortune with huge farms and silver mines, completely drained the country's budget in order to preserve the hired division of Tertia. Because of this, and also because of the lack of a regular army, some of them passed on and provided a sad experience. The Italian philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli said that he was against the army of foreign mercenaries. They should not be trusted. Hercules thinks Tertia has gone from being a mercenary to a regular army, so they are different from the French reinforcements that betrayed Machiavelli. However, you might as well cite the example of a Swiss mercenary who fought for France until the day he died. Another example is the National Soldiers of France, who took the side of the townspeople during the Revolution. So it is impossible to confirm the evil intentions of the mercenaries. Hercules thinks that the mercenaries put Machiavelli through a lot of difficulties. Probably about a third of the kingdom's theory was based on personal reasons. Machiavelli himself was not distinguished by military qualities. Considering how weak their army is, hiring mercenaries will only add fuel to the fire. Hercules thinks it's worth focusing on strengthening the main army. Galfes says he's right. There's no need to rely on mercenaries. Most Navy mercenaries can't even ride a horse. Christopher admits that they have flimsy ships, but still they were badly treated by rude people from the army, so now they will have to rebuild them. Galfes and Christopher start a fight with each other. Caroline and Hercules try to calm them down. Hercules says that if they don't stop fighting immediately, he will force them to kiss each other as an order from the emperor. They calm down. Hercules praises them and calls them good boys. He says they don't refuse the navy. If they lose control, it will be difficult to restore it, so you need to hurry up with the construction of ships. Christopher thanks him. Hercules continues, as for the army, we need to add another 10,000 cavalrymen. It would be impossible, but he would be able to find about 3,000 soldiers. He asks Galfes if that's enough for him. He answers in the affirmative. It turns out that the problem lies in the 30,000th army of non-commissioned officers of the regular army. He asks if this is exactly normal. Galfes says that if there are only 30,000 soldiers, then yes, because there is always a certain number of junior officers submitted to search for mercenaries and recruits. Hercules leaves it to General Galfes. He agrees. So, they'll deal with those guys from Personia. Galfes notes that they are a bit problematic. The Personia mercenary corps rebelled against their Lord Emperor 8 years ago. They are traitors who rebelled and plundered the Persona Peninsula. They knew that the ruler was too preoccupied with the slow, heavy cavalry and couldn't handle the light infantry. Galfes thinks they'll use the same tactics. Caroline asks if he means that they will invade their territory again. Galfes believes that, most likely, their scheme is aimed at making the young emperor suffer and stealing the state's finances, because they themselves seem to be in a state of financial poverty. He had heard that the farmers of the Personia Peninsula were not sickly from toxins. Christopher says that then the enemy general is. Galfes confirms that it looks like him. Night falls. This person thinks that he has nothing to fear, because he is the king of this place. He asks how many soldiers they have gathered, and is told that in addition to the 10,000 mercenaries, which includes 5,000 infantry and 5,000 crossbowmen, they have gathered 30,000 infantry and 5,000 light cavalry from various tribes. So in total they have 45,000 soldiers. He says it's not bad. There is in Personia the Black Panther Dalios. The patriarch walks through the castle, carrying documents with him. He sees Hercules and Carolina practicing in the courtyard. They were fighting as hard as he could see. Hercules examines the documents. So, he calculates the state of the army formation and the construction schedule of the ships in front of him. Christopher asks when the war will start. Hercules replies that their soldiers are well trained, but they need to rebuild the ships and gather as many soldiers as possible. Hercules suggests making sure everything is well prepared. After the strategic military meeting, all the military and artisans of the Lemurian fortress were alerted and began to perform their duties. They come to the harbor. Christopher says they've collected all the galleys. Sailboats move quite slowly, so you need to try to sharpen the masts a little and speed them up. After all, in a real battle, the ship will weighted with armor and weapons. They need to mobilize everything they can. In addition, the rowers on the right side row much harder than the others. The ship can turn around. If left like this, it could hit allied ships. We need to deal with these shortcomings as soon as possible. Christopher agrees. On the training ground, there are training fights. Someone defeats everyone and asks them what it is, if that's the only reason they're scared. He demands that they do not even dream of defending the empire with such powers. Their enemy is the barbarians who stole the land of their country. Will they continue to retreat? He requires them to pretend that he is a general in the enemy army and must attack with the intent to kill. He won't let them go home until they defeat him. Before the war for the restoration of the lost lands in Personia, everyone gave their best in preparation. To raise the soldiers' morale and strength, Hercules is training with Caroline right now. As expected of a daughter from a family of meritorious knights, he can't find a single gap in her defense. He calls out that the High Knight is behind him, but Caroline says that this trick will not make her lose her guard. The knight always behaves calmly. Excitement can cost him his life. Hercules agrees with her. After all, she is the daughter of Galenos. He asks how about it. He jumps down from the porch, activates the innate body enhancement magic, and strikes. Caroline tries to shield herself with her sword, but Hercules cuts her sword in half. He asks her what she will do now. It activates an innate magic called experimental speed. He comes close to her, but she stabs him and tells him that he shouldn't be overconfident just because he broke her sword. He admits that he lost and asks to finish for today. He thinks he's no match for her. Caroline says it's not true. His Majesty was great too. She says he definitely has a talent for swordsmanship. He can do exactly as much as the average person can and thinks that he can't get any better. If Caroline notices that His Majesty is using a link with the spirit he has a contract with, then she won't even be able to resist him. Elves have 3 unique abilities: witchcraft, magic, and spiritual arts. Witchcraft is a kind of gift that allows you to deeply understand the world and interfere with its structure. It is very popular in medicine, in manufacturing, in siege battles, and so on. It was thanks to witchcraft that they were able to build sewage treatment plants in such a short time. Magic may seem similar to witchcraft, but its essence is completely different. Unlike sorcery, which is not designed for combat due to activation restrictions such as pronunciation calculations, magic is often used during unlimited battles. However, it does not matter how much effort a person puts into teaching and practice. Not everyone is compatible with magic. Magic can be divided into 3 main parts. Innate magic is magic that you receive at birth, such as extreme speed, which is wielded by Carolina. This magic increases the speed of the body by several times. Bloodline magic that can only be obtained through one's bloodline. His sword, made for the Emperor, fits this category. Anything they pick up turns into a top-class weapon. Even an ordinary fork can pierce anything. And hereditary magic, a type of magic inherited from person to person. The Emperor who belongs to him is a good example. Magic passed down from generation to generation emperors of Lemuria is the main sign of the emperor's successor. Using it, he can gain psychological advantages over other elves. This played a huge role in the discussion of financial reform with the nobles. And finally, spiritual art. This technique allows you to make contracts with spirits for their help. Spirits represent the will and power of nature, and through a contractual relationship, a person can use their power in spiritual arts. Anyone who has signed a contract with a spirit can do it, so there are many values. In rural areas, there are often spirits who can predict the weather, but since it is a contract that is signed, the spirits must be paid for their work. The downside is that every time you use the power of the spirit, you have to pay it back. In the contract of Hercules, the condition is a source of magical power. His spirit will not help much in battle, but this is not important. He's relieved that Caroline wasn't hurt. Caroline doesn't answer. Hercules holds out his hand and asks her to come back to the room. He asks for help to get up. Caroline takes his hand, and Hercules forcefully pulls her arm, and as a result, she is now lying on the ground, and Hercules is looming over her. He says she let her guard down. Ta shouts that she thought they finished training. Lying in front of her, Hercules asks what's wrong. Why is she blushing so much? He asks if now is not the time to use extreme speed. She replies that if she uses it in the current situation, Her Majesty will simply blow it away. She asks if that's what he wants. Hercules, who had been resting on his elbows before, lets go of his hands and says that she is trying to behave calmly, reports that his hands are tired because of training. Caroline says it's not fair and demands that their Majesty stop. Hercules smiles and says that it is very easy to confuse her. He runs his hand over Caroline's face, stroking her hair, and sees that the pendant he bought back then is still wearing it. They are watched by the patriarch, who envies a carefree youth. Hercules notices him and asks him what he wants. He apologizes, but says that His Highness Titus called him. Hercules is surprised to find his brother Titus waiting for him. He is sitting in the room, working on a sculpture, and is angry. He says that he has already spent a full 10 minutes waiting for his younger brother, 10 precious minutes to see if His Highness needs to show a little more respect for his own older brother. This is Titus, the second prince, the elder brother of Hercules. He tells Hercules Thathanos that he can't concentrate on his work while waiting, but apparently his indifference to the people waiting for him can't be changed. While he creates masterpieces, people like him, who are not immersed in art, do nothing but flirt with girls. And these 10 minutes are very valuable for the person waiting, but he doesn't care. And it's a huge mistake if he thinks that he works the same way as other people. Hercules puts his fingers in his ears and doesn't listen to him, and then says it's his fault. He promises to reserve good spot for his next exhibition. Titus smiles and says that His Majesty is a very powerful man. He's gorgeous, his dear little brother. Hercules thinks that who would have thought that such a simpleton even existed in this world. Titus asks him to sit down while he makes coffee. Hercules agrees. He wants to sit on a chair, but Titus stops him and asks him not to sit on this chair, because it is unique. Hercules asks why, and Titus explains that they call him the cursed chair. It was the favorite chair of a man who had been executed for serial murder, and as soon as he sat down, the restless spirit would kill him. Or so he'd been told. This chair has caused the deaths of more than 50 people. It's terrifying. Hercules wonders if this is Busby's chair. Hercules says, how about we hang it on the ceiling instead of having a party? Titus agrees and offers to put it on display. Titus II, son of the Hadrian family, his older brother, and the second prince of the Lemuria Empire. But he doesn't feel any brotherly connection, because they are stepbrothers and grew up separately. But when it comes to art, their points of view coincide, so they often talk, despite the fact that Hercules is only an amateur. And even though Hercules, the younger brother, ascended the throne, their relationship did not change. Hercules asks Titus how His Highness Hadrian is doing. Titus replies that he is still not out in the world. Titus thinks that Hadrian can't get over the fact that he didn't get the crown. Hercules asks if he should just give it to her. Titus does not advise him to do this. If he gives up the crown, then the state will end. Hercules asks Titus if he needs a crown. Titus says he doesn't need to and asks His Majesty to stop joking. He created a place for exhibitions, which is called a museum, an art gallery, and also opened coffee, which gives a cheerful mood for a few hours, and he simply does not have time to be an emperor. When he was done with the sculpture, he would need to paint a few paintings, and after that, he would also need to make the scenery for next month's concert. He has so much inspiration, but not enough hands. You probably need to clone yourself. Hercules says he's just like a Huizan. Titus asks him again who he is. Hercules asks you to forget about it. It's just thinking out loud. The second son of the family is Titus, and the third son is Adrian. As you might have guessed, Adrian was named after his father. In fact, Titus had hoped that Hadrian would take the throne. Before they parted ways, he said have a nice day, but he just looked at him like he absolutely hated him. Hercules explains that he simply can't handle this problem. He was the first child of his father, and then his upbringing was not crowned with success, and even if he cares, he will not solve this problem. He has two older brothers. The second son of the family is Titus, and the third is Adrian. As you might have guessed, Adrian was named after his father. And if he had come to the throne, he would have been called Hadrian IV. The father wanted to make his first child the heir. Perhaps this name was given to him with the hope of realizing father's dreams, but his father was wrong in his way of love. Adrian was spoiled by his father. He became selfish and turned away from society. As far as he knows, he used his powers for bad reasons, attacking the aristocrats' neighborhood children and dealing with them cruelly. Each time, his father bowed to the victims and their families to cover up the case. All this was just for the sake of the child inheriting the title of emperor. Titus says that once upon a time he broke his painting in the dust. Hercules says that he has never heard of it and says that if they are brothers, they must have quarreled with him. Titus says that's not the case. He had a fight with his father when he said he shouldn't have drawn in front of Adrian. That day, he learned a new word: baselessness. Looking at Titus, Hercules thinks he looks like a corpse. But still, it's his father's fault for Adrian's temper. Titus thinks his father hoped it would pass in time, but it didn't. 14 years ago, he attacked 4 noble children, and the entire empire was shaken by unrest. Adrian was calm, thinking that his father would think of something. However, in the end, my father gave up. Titus asks Hercules if he knew that his father was a terribly determined man. After the first time he went up to him, looked at his scrawl and said that Titus was probably useless too and never came back. Hercules asks if that's when Titus started hating his father. The first son is as useless as the second. Military operations are unfolding, and the political situation is also unclear. And when the father was cornered, another son was born. It was Hercules. He says he was born at the perfect time. And what's more, he's been great at everything since he was a kid. For my father, he was a real miracle. Since then, all his love has been shown to him, and he has completely forgotten about Adrian, which is why Adrian hates him. Happy ending, that's all. Hercules asks what is happy here. It is very problematic. Plus, the father is terrible at raising children. Titus says that this is not the case at all, because Hercules is the result of his success. He avoided the mistakes made with his first and second sons. The heirs of the royal families are a real creation, achieved by the bitter experience of previously born children. If a masterpiece was born from the very beginning, then no one would have to suffer. In fact, Their Majesty solved the problem of the financial crisis, and he also managed to build such a social infrastructure as a sewer cleaner. Hercules thanks him. Titus asks when he will get rid of Adrian, because no one knows when his older brother with a thirst for power will behead him. Hercules asks Titus if he's really that excited about this. He's not going to do it. As long as Adrian is quiet, he won't touch him either. Titus asks if Hercules really thinks his brother will do nothing. Wouldn't it be a problem if he contacted the elven aristocracy? Hercules tells Titus that he knows absolutely nothing about politics. He asks what and how they will do. Would the aristocrats rebel? It's impossible. The movement of goods and people is simply tracked through guilds. They might be attacked, but that's even more impossible. No assassin can break through the Carolina's security detail. And if he does commit murder, he can easily be arrested or killed for a variety of reasons. Titus notices that Hercules says scary things. Hercules tells him that he has remembered something about Caroline and asks Titus if Titus says that's why he called him. He hands him a small suitcase and says here it is. Hercules opens the suitcase, looks at the contents, and says that as expected from Titus, what's in the suitcase is perfect. Titus is glad to hear that. He asks where only Hercules got the design. He made the size exactly as everyone asked. Titus asks if everything is all right. Hercules replies that he looks cool. Titus asks if he wasn't going to give it to Miss Caroline when the military reform is successful, because he said he can't do it until the outcome is clear. Someone knocks on the door. Titus asks to come in. Enter Galfes and Christopher. They apologize, but they need their highness. They report that the training of an additional 30,000 infantrymen and junior officers has been completed. The fleet was rebuilt and reached the maximum number of ships in use. Titus asks what this means, and Hercules explains that it is so. They will reclaim the Personia Peninsula, and from that moment on, the war will begin. The territory of Personia is a land based on the territory of the Lemurian Empire. Their main income came from exporting products such as grapes, olives, and marble. But it was obvious that it wouldn't be enough to continue hiring roughly 10,000 mercenaries. 8 years ago, when he was 4 years old, a mercenary broke in because his predecessor, Adrian III, stopped paying the money agreed in the contract with the mercenaries. To put down the rebellion, he took command of the troops and started a war, but he was defeated by an army under the command of Dalios. Eventually, peace was established, but they had to sacrifice the Personia Peninsula. From then on, the Personia Peninsula functioned as a de facto state and was run by mercenaries. Their ruler, Dalios, called for stealing, dominating, oppressing, and forcing. Personia Bay. In the tavern, customers drink beer and think about what a beautiful night it is. But suddenly there are explosions. Someone commands that everyone quickly go to their places and get ready quickly. People don't understand what's going on. They see a huge fleet approaching them. They don't understand anything. On the streets of the city are mercenaries who are starving and have no money, while the aristocracy does not deny itself anything. Dalios is being asked to lower taxes because this is a country full of poor people. Even though he freed them from Lemuria's control, they ended up squandering all the money. What would they do without it? He crumples the paper with the petition and throws it away, then drinks the wine and says that at least the wine here is delicious and the food is better than in Lemuria. His subordinate says that they have detected movement from the direction of the Lemurian Empire. Most likely, they are preparing for an invasion. Dalios says he already knows. The subordinate asks if he really wants to start attacking Lemuria. Dalios explains that they have nothing to fear. They are ruled by a 15-year-old boy who has never experienced wars. Moreover, he is Adrian's offspring. Dalios is sure that Hercules took after his father and will go to pray to the gods or do something similar to win. After all, the apple tree's apple doesn't fall far. He asks how they like the idea of making this first war memorable for him. A soldier breaks in and tells him that he has bad news. Dalios is angry. He throws down his wine glass and shouts how dare he barge in and distract him like that. Now he won't be able to eat properly. He says that he is very sorry, but they received a letter saying that the army of the Empire entered their territory. Everyone is startled, and so is Dalios. He's furious, yelling what's going on. The soldiers explain that Lemuria decided to make a surprise attack. Dalios already knew that. He asks where the invasion started. The soldiers explain that the invasion started from the bay. Personia Bay fell to the onslaught of the Lemurian Empire's army. Dalios says it's all clear to him. This little rat dared to attack. While on the ship, Hercules asks Galfes if he knew that Personia has no ships. Dalios realizes that the fact that they were preparing for an attack from land didn't turn out well. If they had a single ship, they would have held them off until the troops landed. Then we need to call the soldiers together immediately. Dalios says he knows about it. If the Empire's troops are in Personia Bay right now, there are only 2 places they can go from here. Either to the fortress where it is located, or to the capital. He's in the fortress now, but they'll have to travel quite a long way to get here. Long-distance adventures in heavy armor only reduce the physical strength of soldiers. And since he was thinking more about strategy than Hadrian III, he probably wouldn't make such a stupid move in a surprise attack. If he wants to stay in the black, he will head to the capital. Dalios notices that they were still being naive. Thousands of infantry mercenaries raised in such conditions from childhood, and a total of twin archers gathered here. Plus, they are surrounded by a high wall. It won't fall so easily. Dalios says that you need to control them in front of the wall, and when they slow down, then everything will be over. In this case, even special damage will not be dealt. One of the soldiers reports that the army of Lemuria has broken through the walls of the capital city and entered. Dalios is startled. He asks what he just said. His military training is perfect. Lemuria shouldn't have had such a strong army. The soldier explains that the invasion of Lemuria coincided with a riot in the capital. Dalios is angry. Riot at a time like this, how could it possibly be? He demands that he not tell him that there are traitors among them. At this time, in the capital, its residents are fighting with soldiers. They are going to flee this country and declare that they will not allow themselves to be killed by taxes while the aristocracy enjoys delicious food for their money. The soldiers are asking for an end to this pathetic resistance. They can't let the Imperial army continue to successfully crush them. They ask you to calm down. The townspeople are asking the soldiers to shut up. They'd rather give this land to Lemuria than live like this. They demand that the soldiers leave. The army commander demands that everyone calm down immediately. But residents continue to advance. One of them strikes the commander with a sword and commands that all the castle gates be opened. The Imperial army must enter. Hercules watches his army enter the capital. He's pretty sure Dalios said something like an apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So what does it feel like to have a bullseye pinning your tail? Hercules looks down on Personia from the walls of the capital, and Galfes thinks that he must be very proud of himself. Caroline notices that the invasion went rather smoothly. She asks Hercules how he did it. He replies that everything is extremely simple, with the help of money. Caroline is surprised that with the help of money. Hercules explains that Dalios hired mercenaries who were raised in such conditions from childhood. These guys are very loyal to him, so if he tried to win, they would take revenge. But there weren't enough loyal mercenaries to defend the cities, so Dalios hired some more mercenaries from abroad, so they first lured them to their side, paying twice as much. He was aware of his intention 3 months ago. Galfes recalls that he has already said that you should not trust the mercenaries. Hercules tells us that when he sent some bribed mercenaries into the city, he used them to start a riot among the townspeople. Carolina asks how they were even able to do something like this, relying on the townspeople. Hercules explains that they were fed up with the tyranny of Dalios from the very beginning. Their annoyance grew day by day. It would have been possible to start a rebellion with the help of those loyal mercenaries, but they would have had to be voluntarily lured to their side for a long time, and now they have already opened the gates. In any case, the success of this invasion was clear 3 months ago. Now he thinks they're ready, so he needs to meet Dalios on a better battlefield. Hercules notices that Galfes is about to say something. He asks him about it, but Galfes says nothing. Then he announces that His Majesty is taking command of the war for the first time. Up to this point, his orders had been flawless, but this success was like a miracle. He thinks they should do a better job of defending this vantage point that they're holding so far. Hercules laughs and says that a general in the Imperial army offering to defend himself right in front of his daughter. Was he acting like a weakling right now? They have every chance of winning. Personia Peninsula was a territory of the Empire until the last 8 years. Based on the information he received from the merchants, it could be said that its geography hadn't changed much. Galfes asks what if these merchants were also bribed by Dalios. Hercules thinks Galfes is very careful. He shows him a map of the Personia Peninsula. He found it when he fell asleep in the castle library. Comparing it with the information of the merchants, everything almost coincided. The day after tomorrow, Dalios will attack this town in order to retake it. He suggests starting the attack with archers, using this hill as a base. There is a river flowing on the other side of the hill, so they will only need to defend the front and rear. He suggests giving the other soldiers time to dig trenches and defend themselves. This will be enough to compensate for the lax soldiers. Hercules demands that Galfes calm down. He's not like his father. When he was 4, his father brought him to the battlefield for the first time. Even then, he was wearing heavy armor. After losing many battles, he learned many ways to escape and eavesdropped on his and his father's conflicts. Dalios is terrible at running the country, but his record is 2 consecutive victories over the Empire. Caroline says that Hercules can't win with just his own strength. Hercules says that he will listen to their opinion and choose a strategy after discussing it with them. They will see this victory together. Galfes bows his head and says that Hercules has grown a lot. He asks to leave this victory in this war to him. He would deliver it to their majesties, no matter what the cost. Hercules declares that he is counting on him. Galfes raging fire. He says he understood the emperor. Hercules sits alone in his room and reflects that the surprise attack in the bay and the capture of the capital, just as Galfes said, everything is going like clockwork. Dalios must have been panicking these past few days. During this time, they will have to finish all the preparations. It will take the infantry 2 days to reach the city to the north. Christopher is also busy defending the bay. The war will start in 2 days. Their army, which has doubled in size, will be in the black. A demoness appears in front of him and asks him if he is awake and if she can help him. Hercules refuses. Meanwhile, Dalios is assembling an army. It requires them to move faster. He's not going to dance to Lemuria's tune anymore. He believes that Hercules underestimated him. He will kill. Hercules wonders what step Dalios will take. The triple attack rule. The attacking side needs 3 times as many men to defeat the currently defending enemies. The rule says that it is better to defend than to attack. However, the attacking country has a much greater choice of location and timing of their attack than the defending country. So we can say that it is easier for the attacking country to take the initiative in the war than for the defending country. So, they will attack strategically and defend tactfully and win. This is what their fight will look like. Caroline asks if that doesn't mean their enemies will take the initiative. Hercules explains that the truth is that both sides, both the defender and the attacker, can take the initiative on the battlefield. And you can't say for sure that they don't defend, but they don't attack either, but he will easily allow them to attack. Apparently, Dalios' management had made the townspeople hate him. Accordingly, his weakness is that he dominates everyone at the expense of fear. When the mercenaries realize that the war is losing for them and no one will help them, they will escape to the desert. Carolina asks why they should do this. Isn't it easier for the soldiers to gather around their leader? Hercules explains that for mercenaries, war is a business, and she knows it. They can't be loyal enough to devote themselves to a war without a chance of winning. In the end, it's all about money. You can't trust them. The oath in the country and the desire to give your life for it is fundamentally different from an army of such soldiers. He thinks Dalios wants to beat him as soon as he can, and he doesn't care how disrespectful his position is, so they need to tease him. It's time for a decisive battle. Enemy soldiers are detected. From the army, the Personians are advancing from the front. Hercules asks how many there are one of them. One of the soldiers says that based on what the eye sees, there are about 40,000 of them. These damn traitors are here. Galfes points out to Hercules that he sees them. They see enemy flags. Dalios rides at their head. The front line consists of about 28,000 mercenaries from abroad. From the flanks without consist of about 5,000 cavalrymen of different races, and finally the rear is closed by 4,000 well-trained infantrymen and a group of crossbowmen of 3,000 riflemen. Hercules knows. The information is exactly the same as what he received from the bribed mercenaries. In total, they have a heavy cavalry force of 8,000 soldiers, 15,000 infantry, and 5,000 longbowmen. A total of 28,000 soldiers. All of their soldiers in numbers barely compare to infantry. However, they have advantages in this protection. Stakes and trenches. If they just went straight across the river, it was obvious that they would be bombarded with arrows like raindrops in a storm. Dalios will try to break through, but Hercules doesn't think he has many options other than a simple path to the breach. But if that happens, everything will depend on the actual strength of their opponents. He turns to the soldiers, asks them to listen, because today will be a new page in the history of Lemuria. After this battle, their empire will be reborn. They will return their territory to the Persona. The soldiers respond with a shout of joy. Dalios calls Hercules petty and declares that he will make him feel sorry for him. He commands the offensive. Hercules commands archers to aim and fire. Thousands of arrows are flying towards Dalios' army. Soldiers summon wind spirits and ask them to dance among the arrows. Arrows pierce enemies. Dalios is surprised that all the same actions, they use the spirits for defense to attack them from afar themselves. Elves are famous for their shooting abilities, so they can easily shoot 10 arrows in a minute. As far as he can see, they have about 5,000 archers. This means that 50,000 arrows will fall on them every minute. Compared to their archers, Lemuria's archers are worse at penetrating armor. But if 1,000 arrows are aimed at the face or exposed parts of the body, 500 in a minute, 1,000 in 2 minutes, and in 10 minutes 5,000 soldiers will die or be incapacitated, even without critical wounds. It's enough to break their morale. But still, the soldiers say they don't want to die, that they are wounded, and some ask for help. Arrows fly at the enemy. Many of the mercenaries drop dead. Dalios wonders if there are any weaklings willing to give up. He asks what the hell they're doing. He won't let his money go to waste. The mercenaries are forced to grab their weapons and run forward. Hercules is watching their advance. It's clear to him that those who run will still be killed, but they're holding up better than he thought. If this continued, they might reach their archers. He thinks the time has come and calls for Galfis. He appears and asks if it's really his time to fight. Hercules confirms. He demands that Galfis take command of a heavy cavalry unit and head there. Galfis asks him to wait. Because of the heavy cavalryman's armor, it would be almost impossible to cross the trenches. No matter how you look at it, it's an impossible move. Galfis says that he understands everything, and he understood their majesty, because he knows what he meant. Hercules asks what distance is suitable. Galfis replies that 10 meters is enough. Their Majesty asks him again if he is sure that 10 is enough. Galfis wonders who they think he is. He jumps forward and calls for everyone to follow him, not to stop, no matter what. Now they will show the result of all their training, spread their victory song all over Lemuria. Caroline's father asks her to stay behind him as support from the rear. She agrees. So the cavalry is advancing. Hercules counts down the distance to the enemy. Dalios doesn't know if they're serious, if they're planning to break through their trenches. They overestimate trenches and armor. He understands that this is so and demands that the soldiers be urgently recalled now. When 10 meters remain, he calls upon the spirit of Asmodeus to cancel the illusion. She agrees. Caroline's father tells her that His Majesty has removed the spirit illusion technique. Caroline shouts that she will tear the enemies to pieces, and Galfis promises to burn them with one voice. They invoke the spirit of Oligos and spirit of Ammon. The fight begins. They fight their enemies. The king commands forward. The cavalry is breaking through. They shoot a lot of arrows. They are helped by spirits. Carolina rushes forward, and Dalios knows they can't make it. Who would have thought that he could hide his offensive paths so well with the technology he invented? Was he really the son of that fool? He genuinely doesn't understand how a hawk can be born from a snake. He thinks it will be fun and orders the sergeant to change his strategy. Galfis sees that something has changed. Hercules understands that they have stopped resisting and split up, but does not understand why. A thought occurs to him. At this time, on the battlefield, they tell Galfis that he should pay attention to the enemy's behavior. He replies that he noticed and asks not to lose vigilance. They see that a new army is coming. From behind the archers comes a crossbow unit, which Dalios commands forward. It requires them not to stop and move forward. A new fight begins. Several soldiers surrounded Galfis. They charge at him. They are sure that the army of Hercules will not pass through the trench. Galfis notice that things are going badly. They are pushed back. A soldier reports to Hercules that the 1st and 3rd divisions have broken through. The infantry is trying to deal with the situation, but they won't be able to hold them off for long. He asks their Majesty to give the order. Hercules understands what Dalios is up to. He wants to destroy them with heavy cavalry. He divided the central foot soldiers and sent them in different directions, thus hindering the movement of their cavalry, which was already exhausted by constant maneuvers, and then sent crossbowmen and spearmen. They also blocked them with a wall of spearmen. Even if they could hold off their crossbowmen and spearmen, if they used light cavalry, it would cover their flanks and regrouped infantry, and then they would be trapped. It's clear to Dalios that, as he thought, Hercules doesn't have a backup plan. Hercules says aloud that this is how he fights. The sergeant doesn't know what he's talking about, or why he's smiling like he's enjoying himself. Hercules praises Dalios and asks the colonel if he can bring his horse. He is sure that he is the winner of this battle. Carolina fights with spearmen. She knows it's bad, but her father is counting on her. Her horse is also tired, but she must find a way to defeat her enemies. She charges, but a crossbow bolt knocks her off her horse. Two mercenaries approach her. One asks how much they will get for the head of the enemy commander. The second asks what he's talking about, because it's just a child in front of them. But the first one will explain that this is the daughter of the famous Galfes, and he is willing to bet that they will make a lot of money, given that this is a famous knight. They think it might be better to put her up for auction at a slave auction. They're going to take her to the commander. Caroline jumps to her feet and thinks it's very frivolous to discuss such things. She wouldn't let someone like them ruin His Majesty's plans. With a broken sword, she charges at the two mercenaries. Hercules himself leads the charge, the infantry moving behind him. Dalios smiles, wondering if Hercules has decided to go to his death with his precious army. However, Lemuria only has about 10,000 soldiers, no more. Even if it's a little more, it won't change anything. But he sees that a huge army is approaching from the fortress. Dalios doesn't understand where they came from. The mercenaries claim that they didn't think this would happen and they didn't sign up for it. Not for that kind of money. They decide to run away. Dalios demands that they return to their positions. This is the spirit of illusion. It can't be that Lemuria has so many warriors. But his soldiers are fleeing the battlefield. Carolina sees that the enemy warriors seem to be retreating. Someone calls out to her. Hercules rides up to her. He holds out his hand for her to grasp. He puts her on his horse. Caroline is sorry that this has happened. Hercules claims that everything is fine. She fought well for her first battle. She asks permission to ask their majesties a question. She asks why he hid the fact that Lemuria has so many warriors. Hercules believes that the outcome of the battle would have been different if they had fought at full strength initially. Carolina clarifies that maybe they are all mercenaries that they bribed, but she sees that most of the soldiers immediately disappear. It's just an illusion. An illusion like this will require an appropriate reward, the demon tells him. Hercules mentally replies that he knows and asks her to disappear. She says she'll come back for the reward later. Hercules explains to Caroline that it is difficult to destroy all 40,000 soldiers one by one. As soon as the opponent loses the desire to fight, seeing the illusion, victory is in their pocket. Dalios will not be able to organize a competent defense after such a defeat. The outcome of the battle is already obvious. He commands Garfes to retreat, and they return to the base. Galfes says he trusts Caroline and the soldiers in him, and he won't be staying long yet. Hercules advises him to make sure there is no tail and not overdo it. He agrees with him. So the first war under the leadership of Hercules, as the emperor of the Lemurian Empire, ended with a complete victory. Lemurian army of heavy cavalry, 300 casualties, 700 left, archers 200 losses, 800 left, infantry 1,000 losses, now 14,000 left. The total number of surviving soldiers is 26,000. Personia army, infantry losses 0, 4,000 left, crossbowmen losses 0, 3,000 left. The mercenary infantry has been destroyed. No one survived. Cavalry losses 0, 5,000 left. The total number of surviving soldiers is 12,000. Hercules' army sets up camp. They collect the wounded and dead, help the wounded, prepare food. Meanwhile, in the castle, Hercules is writing a message to someone. Galfes calls out to him and tells him that they have brought him. Enter Dalios. Hercules says that he thought he would fight back a little harder, but he is quite quiet. Dalios says that after such a devastating defeat, The remaining soldiers will not follow him. Unfortunately, they are not related to him by blood or authority. He admits how much he didn't appreciate their highness abilities. This is a complete rout. He asks permission to admit his guilt for this rudeness. Galfes asks how he dares to speak so arrogantly while tied up. Hercules laughs and says that this time the victory is his, but if it was a direct clash on equal terms, then he thinks the same as Dalios. Dalios claims that then he would have won. Hercules agrees with him and says that he thinks so too. After fighting him, he learned a lot. He had just surpassed his predecessor. So Dalios admits his guilt. He asks to hear the terms of the peace treaty. Dalios says that their highness will receive all the lands, and in return, he must spare the lives of his close subordinates, whom he raised from a very young age. Galfes is angry. He asks if Thoth has any idea how much chaos they will create, but Dalios says they can deport them. Only they followed him to the last. With the rest of the troops and with him, they are free to do as they please. They can give it to the mob or personally avenge the previous emperor. Hercules can do whatever he wants. Hercules agrees, saying that he will spare the lives of his subordinates. Galfes tries to stop him, but Hercules informs him that he will also have one condition. It is impossible to assess the damage they have done to the empire, as well as to its national prestige, and a bunch of heads of his subordinates won't pay for it. Even his head, which 10 million inhabitants will turn into a ball, will not be able to redeem it. Dalios asks Hercules what he will do. He replies that Dalios will become his vassal. Galfes asks Hercules how he can even say such a thing. Dalios laughs and says that he knew that Hercules is not ordinary, but not that ordinary. He wants to make a vassal of the one who has recorded his father's disgrace in history. Hercules asks again if this is so unusual. The predecessor did nothing but lose. Right now, Lemuria doesn't have a shred of its former power, so he wondered why he couldn't get one experienced warrior for his own use. Besides, the problem is that at the moment, Galfes is the only experienced commander he can trust with a squad of 10,000 people. Their army loses to a mercenary, so I would like to learn some skills. In addition, he is going to pay the reward that his predecessor pocketed. Dalios says that you shouldn't be so amused by this, because he is also a mercenary and can shoot an arrow in the back. Hercules says he is absolutely serious. Dalios asks what will happen if he refuses. Hercules laughs and says that he just offered him a great place in the sun, but he is so disgusted by the idea of becoming someone's chain dog. He asks if Dalios is really ready to shoot an arrow in the back. He says the names of Dalios, tries to use magic. Dalios asks who he's talking to right now, but he keeps saying some kind of incantation. This is some unimaginable magic power. Dalios admits that he can't breathe, but Hercules is just a brat. Where did he get so much magic power? And this is his memory. At this time, Caroline faints, but Hercules manages to catch her. Dalios also falls to the floor. Hercules tells him that he will not expel his subordinates from the country. He's going to find some suitable land somewhere and settle them there. Their holdings have fallen into disrepair, so it will take a lifetime to cultivate the land. He asks Dalios if he knows what he's talking about. He asks again what it means. The moment it decided to attack him, it was already wearing a collar around its neck. As of today, Hercules claims to count on his cooperation. That dumbass's son won back the Persona. In Lemuria, people ask each other if this is true and Daylon has lost. Tomorrow, we need to announce it and start preparing for the banquet. Adrian drops the vase of flowers on the floor. Someone tells him that if he rages like this, they will hear him. He can't believe that such a small country could win. He's much better suited to the role of emperor. The Lemurian army is coming back. The townspeople greet their emperor. To applause, the brave warriors enter the capital. Hercules and Caroline are in the lead. Hercules greets the residents. They praise him. They are met by Crawl, Archbishop, and Titus. Titus says they were waiting for him. Hercules asks if anything happened while he was away. Titus replies that everyone worked hard. The emperor says they've heard about their achievements in Personia. Everyone is incredibly excited. Hercules agrees. Of course, they won, and this also helps to increase his rating. Hercules spins around. Titus asks what happened. Hercules tries to find out where Hadrian is. Titus apologizes and says that he is not present on an important day because he does not like to show himself in public. The patriarch turns to Dalios and says that she has heard that he has also performed admirably. She giggles. Galfes exclaims that he has decided to waste his highness' amnesty. What's so rude? Christopher thinks of drowning him in the Lemurian Sea. The patriarch turns to Hercules and asks what Dalios is doing here. He is scheduled to be publicly executed. Isn't that right? Hercules replies that it can be considered his trophy of war. He will be a vassal. Everyone looks at him and wonders how strong he is, how big his muscles are. The patriarch asks if Hercules is sure of his decision. He replies that he is. The patriarch says that whatever it was, thanks to him, the war ended successfully. She had prepared a place for him at the banquet, so he should definitely come there. Hercules asks what the banquet is. Kroll believes that Hercules is tired after a long journey, but there are no urgent matters for today, so you can rest. In other words, today he is completely free. Titus says this is their first win in a long time, so he will prepare their best wine. Galfes and Hercules thank him. Titus thinks he will write a heroic tale about Hercules. He asks permission to hear all the details during the banquet. Hercules disappears. The patriarch can't figure out where he is. He was just here. He may have gone to get a reward. Galfes notices that Caroline isn't there either. He asks if anyone has seen Caroline. Carolina says that this is the first time she has worn such clothes and does not know if it is suitable. Hercules thinks it's perfect. It's just perfect. She tries to straighten her dress, which is very short. She confusedly says that then she is happy. Hercules, looking at her, says that everything is fine. It suits her very well. Carolina thinks that she feels a chill and asks again if she can change her clothes already. Hercules says he just explained everything to her. She is angry, but says out loud that she is a humble servant of the master. Today she will serve him. Hercules says she's good at it, but Caroline doesn't understand how it all came about. It was true that she had spoken of a reward if the Lemurian army could prove itself, but she had never imagined that His Majesty Titus would prepare such a uniform. The skirt lifts up even at the slightest movement, and she is very ashamed. Hercules suggests starting with tea. Caroline asks him what kind of tea he wants. He sees the can of tea at the very top and chooses it. He says he wants black tea from that red jar at the top. Carolina says it will be done. She'll be right back with the ladder. Hercules reminds her that stairs are forbidden. She had to deal with it on her own, and she couldn't use magic either. Carolina reaches out, trying to reach the jar, but she can't reach it that way, and she holds her skirt up with her other hand. If she lets it go, she might get it. Hercules demands that she take her hands off her skirt, says it's in order. She lets go of the hand, stands up on the chains, pulls herself up on one arm, and realizes that she is still a little bit away and the bank is very close. However, she does not understand how she could allow a proud knight of the Lemur army to appear before the emperor in this form. She asks Hercules not to look. He says she has just a little more time. She realizes he's still watching. Hercules asks if it's too long for such a simple task. Carolina admits that she doesn't get enough. Hercules reminds her that she is an elf, so she can just jump up and down. Or she might be willing to disobey an order just because her skirt might pull up. He prepared the best clothes for her to show off in all its glory. Was this all her loyalty to the emperor? She thinks that His Highness sacrificed himself to save her, and she's hesitating in such a simple situation, unable to even serve tea. She should return the favor. She jumps up and pulls out a can of tea. At this time, the skirt also rises up, and when she falls to her feet, the skirt is thrown back even higher. She apologizes for waiting, and she'll make him some tea right away. Hercules says it means they're black, so you should thank Titus. Caroline is outraged. She makes tea, says that you need to wait a little while until the tea leaves are brewed. Hercules thinks that she is angry, but still continues to call him master. He calls Caroline, asks her to come over and offers to make up. Caroline walks up to him. He invites her to sit on his lap. She says it's heavy, but Hercules says it's an order. She sits on his lap. Hercules asks what's wrong with her, because during training she doesn't hesitate to do it. Carolina says it's not even a training session. He hugs her and whispers that she's cute. Caroline screams that he won't buy her off with such cheap flattery. Hercules apologizes and says that he seems to have played a little too much, so she should excuse him. Caroline asks him what's bothering him. He explains that this is the case. He had always looked at his father's back, and now he was going to war for the first time. This is a lot of pressure for him. The common people keep a close eye on the emperor. Political and financial issues, infrastructure improvements. That was why he had to win this war in order for people to accept him. Thanks to the victory, the number of people who are dissatisfied with him will also decrease. And this is like a mountain off your shoulders. He also managed to save her. Caroline says he should show up at the banquet then. He must present himself in a heroic guise, show off his strength and manhood, show her just as they had shown her on the battlefield. Without a shred of doubt, he went straight to her. She apologizes and asks if maybe she should call him His Majesty at a time like this. She talked too much. He tugs at her cheeks. Caroline asks him what he's doing. Hercules explains that this is how he plays pull-pull, and then he admits that she is right. If he does this, then Christopher will not find fault with him. But he asks if she can be his maid for a little longer. She agrees, calls him master. Hercules kisses her. A little later, they appear together with Caroline at the banquet. Looking at them, the nobles can't imagine him as a hero, because he was stronger than Gelfis and Dalios. Titus imagines drawing a similar picture. Christopher is angry. Hercules and Caroline then appear in front of the soldiers. He raises his glass of wine. At night, Hercules is asleep when a demoness appears near him. She wakes him up and tells him it's a beautiful night. Doesn't he think? She's here to fulfill a contract. Hercules wakes up and sees a demoness in front of him. She giggles and says he's finally awake. She had called out to him so many times that she thought he was dead. He asks her what she's talking about, because they're in his dream right now. She agrees. She says she knows he's tired right now, but a contract is a contract. As always, she will get what she needs. Her name is Asmodeus. He's the only one who can see her. It's contractual spirit. She used to be a cherub, but she became a fallen angel, moving beyond the mortal sin of lust. She's a demon now. Among the 72 pillars is 32, rank queen. Whoever signed a contract with her would have a huge advantage. In return, it absorbs a huge amount of mana and sperm. She pounces on Hercules. Hercules twitches, asks him to stop and try not to die from it. She says that she is just getting started, and however, an ordinary man will not survive meeting her. She notices that he has gained a lot of spiritual energy since he was a virgin. 5 years ago, 10-year-old Hercules is engaged to the patriarch, who was a nun at the time. She says that he coped with the task so easily and has a great future ahead of him. He grunts in frustration and says that anyone in his family could have done it. Just checking the library once a day is enough for anyone else to do it. The nun says that other emperors are different from him, but she cuts off her speech and doesn't finish it. Hercules thinks that every day is the same. He was tired of it. Suddenly, he feels a severe headache that has returned again. The nun notices, too. He thinks, what the hell is this? What the picture is that pops up in his head. Neither in other countries, nor in the books in the library, he did not see these places. It is possible that they do not belong to this world at all. He has absolutely no idea what kind of people they are or what kind of places they are. These are not his memories. The nun asks if he is all right. Maybe he should call a doctor because he's pale. Hercules refuses. He says it's not necessary. He'll get some rest now and everything will pass. He asks you not to tell anyone. The nun agrees. She suggests that they finish their lesson today, and if he needs anything, he can call the maid. The image of a young man pops up in Hercules' mind. He doesn't know who he is. Someone knocks on his door, but Hercules asks to be left alone. A maidservant enters. Hercules wonders if this is the new girl. He asks if she was taught manners, making him open the door with an insistent sound. She is surprised and says that this is an unusual greeting. The girl says that she seems to understand. She did not choose the best outfit, but it can be like this. She instantly reincarnates and is wearing a different dress. Hercules slams the door shut. He doesn't understand what's going on. These clothes are from his memories, just like the girl herself. She again appears in front of him and says that she does not cease to please the surprised faces of people. Hercules doesn't understand how she got here, because he closed the door, and she explains that it seems that he still has his memory. Hercules asks her what she's talking about. The girl explains that the one who is inside him, and he has long been tormented by this question, isn't it? She asks him not to worry, because these memories don't belong to him. This man and his memories are from a completely different world. These are his memories, not Hercules. These are not memories from another world, and they absolutely do not concern him. Hercules asks what other world she is talking about. Perhaps about another kingdom, but the girl says no. She's talking about another planet. This world is from a different time frame. He asks how she knows about this, and the girl explains that because it was she who fed him these memories. Hercules grabs her neck and asks how she fed it. The girl assumes that he no longer remembers this. When he was only in the bud, she implanted this man's memories in him. She wondered which of them would survive. It seemed that a man without ambition had no chance of defeating him, vain, ambitious, and self-respecting. As a result, his soul disappeared, and his memories and experiences were passed on to Hercules. Now he is him, and the man's soul is no longer a threat to him. Hercules tries to make sense of what he's heard. He tells her that something is still bothering him, why she chose him. The girl explains that several hundred years ago, there was a man who united all the people of Lemuria and founded a monarchical country. Ultimately, this man would have died just like that, but his knowledge is truly colossal, and his mind is outstanding. It can be a lifesaver and a ray of light for Lemuria, so she used it. But more importantly, they have to sign a contract. Hercules asks again what the contract means. The girl giggles and asks to be forgiven for not introducing herself yet. Out 72 great pillar spirits, she is the 32nd queen. Her name is Asmodeus. Hercules recalls that Asmodeus is one of the great evils of humanity. If he made a contract with her, he was finished. He tries to open the door to get out of the room, but the door doesn't open for some reason. He calls for security, asks for someone to help him, but Asmodeus grabs him by the hair and pulls him back. They fall to the floor. The girl explains that they are inside the dream and no one will come. In the real world, he's just sleeping at his desk right now. He twitches, and the girl kisses him. He doesn't remember much about what happened after that, but when he woke up, it was morning and he was lying in bed. The demoness says that after the contract, he became a perfect toy for her. Hercules asks her to stop. He still feels like he's got a bunch of bugs in his stomach. At this time in the night, Adrian meets with a man. He asks for the item that he was supposed to bring him. The man says that he has the item, but first Adrian must give the money. They exchange. The man gives him a bottle and says it's none of his business anymore. Adrian examines the bottle of liquid in his hand. He says it's all for the sake of the Empire. Caroline and Hercules dance at a banquet. At this time, Adrian quietly returns to the castle. He walks through the throne room, looks at the crown, and thinks that the Emperor Hercules is delusional. He's putting on too much airs, but he's only the youngest. The Empire needs him. He asks the servants if this is the case. They answer that it is so. Originally, my father chose it, so this crown is his. He stretches hand to her, but the patriarch appears, who says that it is forbidden to touch her. Adrian looks around and sees the archbishop accompanied by the nuns. She explains that this is a great treasure of the Empire, which was passed down from generation to generation in an honest way. Only the archbishop and the emperor can afford to touch it. This is not a subject that can be lightly touched. Hadrian shouts how dare she tell him, the emperor's son. The archbishop observes that he is right. The emperor planned to choose him as the heir, because that's what he thinks. Adrian is surprised. He asks her what she means. The archbishop asks once again not to touch the imperial crown. If there was even a hint of that, then he might not be waiting for her church to offer a prayer for her death. Adrian gets angry and promises to remind her of it someday, and leaves the throne room with his servants. One of the nuns notices that he just ran away. The archbishop explains that those who do not receive the prayer of repose are equated with suicides whose sin dictates. It is obvious that he will retreat, but just in case you need to be more vigilant. There may be problems with it. In the morning, a magnificent breakfast is served to Hercules at the castle. Hercules is delighted. The cook says that everything was prepared for him in the best possible way. Here is aquapazza margarita, a capre with calzones and tomato paste, rich in his favorite tomatoes. Carolina says that everything looks delicious. Hercules takes a slice of pizza and eats it. The cook asks how he likes it. He replies that it's delicious. It turned out even better than before. The cook is happy because his words are a delight to the ears. He will try even harder to prepare food that will make him shed tears of happiness. By reducing the cost of infrastructure and maintenance of the palace, Hercules used the money for other needs, such as cooking. They only use the freshest produce from the entire empire, and the cooking is done by a family of the best chefs that my father hired. That is why all the food that is now in front of him is the best in the whole world. However, he was already bored with all this. The cook asks if he didn't like something. Hercules denies this, but says that at first he really liked these tomatoes. Pizza, soups, everything is very tasty, but the taste practically does not change, so he has already been sent such food. The cook upset. He doesn't understand how it is, maybe he wants to try something else. Hercules recalls that the boy in his memories often eats one dish. He says he wants to try curry, if he remembers correctly what it's called. The cook says that he will immediately prepare him a carol. Hercules explains that this is different. Curry is a common name, and it uses many different seasonings and spices. It is boiled, fried, sometimes even served with fruit. The main spices are cumin, coriander, cardamom, turmeric, chili pepper, allspice, and so on. Sometimes black or cayenne pepper is added. There is even such food, but all these spices are quite sharp. If he knows all the ingredients, then it will be possible to cook. From the look on his face, it's going to be difficult to recapitulate everything from memory. Hercules says he can search for spices even outside their empire. He introduces the young man who is now their cook. His name is Nala. He says hello. The cook doesn't understand what this slave is doing here. Hercules says that as he reported, he wants to try curry. Almost all the spices can be found in this slave's country, so he brought him to the cook. It is true that he was a former slave, but the Church of the Messiah converted him to their faith, and now he is free. The cook says that everything is clear to him. The young man approaches the cook and says that he is glad to meet him and calls him the boss. He thinks about how courteous he sounds. Hercules asks them to get down to business. The cook stops him. He says that as the head of the kitchen and someone who serves for the good of the Lemur Palace, he has pride. He can't let anyone into his shrine. Can he at least test his cooking skills before making a decision? Hercules realizes that he may be right. In this case, he decides to arrange a contest. These are Galfes, Christopher, the Archbishop, Carolina and Dalios, and someone else. So, you're all set. He gathered the best jury for the benefit of the future palace. He says if they ask why they're here, it's tasting time. Including him, the jury consists of 7 people. They must satisfy each of their languages. As a formality, he hired Nal as a court cook. Caroline me what curry tastes like. He replies that he doesn't know. He hasn't tried it yet either. Galfes says that he has tasted the food of the Sindilians, and therefore is looking forward to it. Christopher reveals that he and the previous emperor once visited Sindilla. For a simple bishop, a meal with lots of spices is an unaffordable luxury. The cook is indignant and says that let them just try to slip some rubbish. Dalios doesn't know what he's doing here. Nal enters the room. He apologizes for waiting. On his plate is exactly the same dish that Hercules saw in his memories. From right to left curry with butter chicken, spinach curry and kimai curry and tandoori chicken. Hercules says it smells really good. Christopher thinks it's a nostalgic smell. He immediately remembers those times. Carolina says it looks delicious, but Dalios thinks it's too hot. The cook carefully examines what is in front of him. The Archbishop says that the first thing to do is to say a prayer to the Lord. Hercules agrees with her. The bishop thanks the Lord for the food and graciously accepts the gift. She asks them to bless the food on this table so that they can support their bodies and spirits. Everyone prays with her. Then Hercules says it's time to eat. He tears off a piece of chicken, looks at the sauces, doesn't know where to start. He dips into the first one and starts chewing. Nal asks me how I feel. Hercules says that it is very tasty and asks the others to try it too. Someone is going to eat with spinach, someone kime sauce, and someone with tandoori chicken. 30 minutes later, all the cups are empty. Carolina says it's delicious. Galfes notes that the taste is very exciting. This is the same Sindali cuisine. The archbishop thinks that this is not possible. It is a sin to eat such delicious food. Nal asks Dalios why he doesn't eat. He replies that he is waiting for it to cool down. The cook thinks they seem to have appreciated his cooking. And what does the food of unknown people taste like? He tries it too. And the truth is that he doesn't like the spicy food, but he realizes that it's actually very tasty. He's surprised. If it's delicious, it's delicious, but he thought the food would be much spicier. Nal asks for forgiveness and says that he made it according to his own recipe. Hercules is surprised. Nal explains that as they know in his country, it is very hot, and they cool down thanks to cold sweat, and when you eat spicy food, you sweat a lot. That's why their curry is so spicy. When you eat curry, sweat and it gets cooler. But he doesn't know how the locals feel about spicy food, so he added some apples and honey. Carolina says that, indeed, personally, she would have preferred a slightly sweeter taste, but it was very tasty as it was. Now Rad is very happy that even here they know about the cuisine of his region, and he likes to watch the satisfied faces of those who eat his cooking. He recalls that once he served in the kitchen, the cooks called him a useless idiot and said that he would spend all his life peeling potatoes, demanded that he mind his own business. But he dreamed that one day he would definitely make a delicious meal for the emperor himself. Hercules says it's time to bring the verdict. You need to raise your hand to someone who would like to taste Nal's cooking again. Galfes raises his hand, says he'd like to eat a little more spicy food. Christopher agrees with him. The archbishop also raises his hand. Caroline says she raises her hand, but says she would like a slightly sweeter curry. Dalios agrees that it's really delicious. Hercules raises his hand and says that he would also like to try a more spicy curry or even with other ingredients. He asks for the cook's opinion. He raises his hand and says that in order to prepare more suitable food for the Lemurians, they should get rid of his habit of being bitter about everything. The cook says that he should also warn him in advance if he needs utensils of this size. He apologizes and says that it was necessary for making tandoor bread. Hercules asks for more food. He asks the others if they will be there. Carolina asks for tandoori chicken. Galfes says the same goes for kameski in addition. Christopher asks for spinach. The archbishop turns to the Lord and asks him to forgive her for this, and Dalios says that it is delicious. The cook bows and says that he will prepare dessert now. Looking at Nal, he involuntarily recalls his past. He probably clings to his position as an imperial chef too much, but he forgot about the most important thing, people's smiles. So after such a hot meal, he will prepare refreshing fruit desserts. He looks around and sees Hercules reclining on a chair, patting his stomach and saying that he hasn't eaten so much in a long time. The chef apologizes to His Majesty, but informs him that the desserts are ready. He hands him a melon and apologizes for waiting. Hercules eats and says that it is a very pleasant sweet. The best thing after curry, melon is just the best. The last piece remains. Dalios yells at them to stop eating. The cook doesn't understand what's going on. Hercules coughs and everyone rushes to him. They don't understand what happened. Caroline and Hercules start vomiting. Galfes grabs Dalios by the collar and shouts at him to stop himself. But Hercules demands that he stop. The melon was poisoned. A rumor is spreading in the city that His Highness has been poisoned. People ask you not to speak so loudly. It is forbidden to talk about it. But they had heard that the poison was in his favorite fruit, the melon. Everyone is so interested in how he feels and who did it. The princess goes to Hercules. Titus tries to stop her and asks her where she's going. She replies that she is going to see His Highness. She had to talk to him. Titus says she can't. The previous emperor forbade her to do so. She replies that His Highness is the future of their country, and more importantly, he is her son. This is Evdokia, the mother of Hadrian and Hercules, and it's pretty obvious that she'll be worried. How could this happen? She asks the Lord to help her son. The patriarch says that the temperature and pulse are fine. There are no deviations. Hercules replies that it was lucky that he didn't have time to take a bite where the poison was. Who would have thought that they would poison the melon? Most likely, they made small holes and then let in a verified amount of poison. If they hadn't noticed the reaction of the poison from silver plate, he would have already been under the coffin lid. He tells Dalios that it's all thanks to him. He replies that he just noticed the rust on his plate while the people sitting next to him were eating dessert both cheeks. Galfes has nothing to say. He apologizes. He was distraught when their former enemy hit his daughter. He thanks Dalios for saving his daughter. Hercules asks the cook if he really tried to kill him. He is on his knees surrounded by guards and explains that he cooks from the bottom of his heart and would never have thought of killing with his own creation, much less killing the emperor himself. Hercules asks where he got that melon. The cook hesitates, afraid to answer, and then says that it was brought by Adrian's assistant, Mr. Dominica. They met him in the hallway on his way to the kitchen. He said it was to celebrate His Highness' victory. He seems to be from the aristocracy, close to Hadrian. 4 years ago, when the land tax was revised and raised, he took out his anger on everyone. From then on, he sided with Adrian. If we assume that this is the work of the aristocracy, left dissatisfied with the fact that they can no longer put money in their pockets, it is quite a possible outcome. The Archbishop doesn't think this is proof, but she tells us what happened in the throne room. Galfes is angry that Hadrian tried to touch the crown. It's a crime, and Hercules understands why he wasn't there during the banquet. The Archbishop suggests we try to find Dominic. Hercules thinks it's useless. He's responsible for the import and export of fruit, and if they interrogate him, they won't get anywhere. The cook claims that he really did not know that the melon was poisoned and asks to believe him. Nal says the chief is a good person. He even shook his hand. Hercules replies that he knows he was just taken advantage of. However, right now he can't say this with complete certainty, and until his doubts are completely dispelled, he forbids him to visit the kitchen. The guards take the cook away. Hercules tells Caroline that she also ate a poisoned melon, so she needs to rest. But why is she here? She replies that she can't sleep while His Highness' life is in danger. This was the moment when she should be there to protect him. She lies down next to him on the bed, puts her head on his legs. Her mother enters his room. She apologizes and asks how he feels. Galfes is surprised to see her. So does Hercules. Caroline jumped out of bed. This is Marie, Galfes' wife and Caroline's mother. Galfes tells her that he asked her not to come here. She says she was worried. Hercules says that nothing terrible happened. Caroline thinks about what her mother has noticed. Marie apologizes that her husband and daughter were so useless at the right time. Hercules tells her to thank Dalios for saving her daughter. Mary bows low to Dalios and says thank you, but he grunts in displeasure. She looks at him and says he has great muscles, just like her husband. Dalios doesn't understand what she wants. Mary suggests that their highness, if he still has an appetite, try a soup with broads and garlic. The Archbishop says it's a great idea. She says that garlic is able to neutralize the poison and recommends that he use more of it in the near future. Hercules asks Caroline if she will be there. She doesn't know what to say and says that she doesn't like garlic very much. But Hercules starts feeding her with a spoon. She eats and thinks that in such an environment, he can't even kiss her. My mother whispers something in Hercules' ear, and Caroline shouts that this is not the time to talk about such things. Mary reveals that she is worried about her future, as she has immersed herself in martial arts, that she doesn't pay attention to anything else. She's worried if she'll ever be a wife. She asks if Mom understands who she's whispering this to. Galfes tells Caroline that this information is extremely important. Caroline is outraged that Papa is also going there. Mary hugs her daughter and says that their daughter is very cute. Carolina asks him to stop, because the Emperor himself is in front of him. After the incident with his brother more than 10 years ago, his father revised the direction of their upbringing and limited his meetings with his mother. He forbade them to communicate as a parent and child, and they met only for the sake of formality. It continues to this day, even after my father died. She continues to visit him, but as an emperor. Even when he's down with a fever, she's never come to check on him. It is obvious that she will not come now. It's not exactly depressing, but it doesn't matter. His mother appears in the room. Titus apologizes and says he tried to stop her, but couldn't. She goes to Hercules. Christopher tries to stop her. He says she can't. She resists the previous emperor's order. She demands that Christopher be quiet. She needs to talk to His Highness. Hercules asks Titus and Christopher to move away. Now he has not just a fever, but they tried to poison him, and she, of course, rushed over when her son is in such danger. Mom says she's here to talk about what happened today. She asks if they found out who did it. He says that he is almost certain that his brother was involved, but he has no proof of this yet. For Mother, they are both equally her children, but the brother went to hell. Even so, she would probably do what her father did. She asks for pity on her brother and says that in order to become what he is now, he tried every day. And she's the one who always looks out for him. She came to tell him that. She is sure that he acted on impulse, but did not mean to harm him. Besides, he's his own brother, and she's begging for his life. Hercules realizes that she didn't come to check on him at all. In any case, there's nothing he can do since he has no proof. However, as the emperor, he can't turn a blind eye to this, so Hadrian will be put on trial. His mother is in shock. She grabs Hercules by the clothes, asks him to have mercy and not kill. Christopher tries to stop her. Mother calls out to Hercules, but he says that he will try his best. She got up from her knees and let her arms hang down. After standing there for a while, she leaves, and at the doorway says that she is thinking about going to a monastery. Hercules asks if he understood her correctly. She says yes. She says that she will pray for the peace of her husband, the sin of her son, and her own sin, because she did not stop him. She will surrender to God. Everyone is amazed. Hercules says that if she has decided so, then he does not dare to contradict her. He asks her if she has already decided which one. The woman answers in the affirmative. She bids farewell to their highness. After she leaves, Hercules turns to Galfes and Christopher and informs them that there will be a meeting today, asking them to gather everyone. He says Adrian is on trial. Adrian is furious. He sticks a pair of scissors into the pillow and shouts that his brother was too big-eyed. He should have just died quietly. The servant informs him that his mother has come to see him. He shouts at him to tell her to go to hell. He is sure that she came as usual to persuade him to become a vassal of Hercules. Adrian thinks about how this is a damned gathering of elders. He needs to bribe the aristocrats with his speeches. Hercules addresses the elders, saying that their country is in danger. Heretics and ill-wishers took their land away from them. They must take what is rightfully their own, as his grandfather fought for. He already has a strong army at his disposal. Their chances are great. He declares the war for the return of the land open. All those gathered in the hall support him with joyful shouts. Adrian stands in front of his father's portrait, asking why he didn't give the crown to him. Night. Adrian is asleep. A girl appears in front of him. She smiles and wishes him a good evening, and asks if it's really a beautiful night. Adrian asks who she is. She giggles and says that she thought people liked this greeting. Wings appear on her back. She says that she is an archangel and the first of the 3 pillars of Gibril. Adrian is surprised that this is a real archangel. He jumps out of bed so that he falls off it. The girl laughs. She asks if this is the first time he's seen an angel. Adrian couldn't imagine angels dressing like this, because the girl in front of him is practically naked. She flies up to him, grabs his face, and tells him that she has a message from God for him, Adrian Julianos. Hercules, the current ruler of this country, will soon go on a hike to the Principality of Trebizond. Thanks to his achievements and the capitulation of Dalios, he has gained huge support within the country, and now he wants to regain all the lost lands. The recent gathering of nobles was just for that. Hadrian thinks that Hercules is arrogant just because of one victory. He asks where she got this information. She answers that firsthand. She was just listening. As she had said, they would start with the principality. They gathered to discuss it in a meeting. At the meeting, Hercules suggested that we start with Dalios. He's surprised. Hercules says that it is important for him to know the analysis of the losing enemy. He's interested in Dalios' point of view. It becomes clear to Tom. He says that the reason he lost was because there was no one else who could lead a huge army. If there was someone else, they would have been able to better distribute their troops and counter Hercules, but there was absolutely no way for him to choose another commander. Hercules asks why. Dalios explains that he does not trust mercenaries, and that they can easily be bribed with money and lured to the other side. In fact, the Emperor demonstrated this. Hercules agrees with him. Dalios says that if this was a plateau, they would have been able to handle it easily, and who would have gone ahead with the advancing force? The most important reason for his defeat is that he stole his father's land. Hercules understands why he did this and agrees with him, but it doesn't make any sense if you don't deal with the country afterwards. Without an understanding of how to run a country, there is no point in expanding ownership. Dalios says that's for sure. Hercules promises to prevent this from happening and do everything as it should, so he has to work hard. So they had listened to Dalios' opinion, and now the Lemurians must speak. Galfi says that if you think about that battle and his instructions, then there are no complaints about the strategy. The main issue is weapons. Carolina asks again why the weapon. Hercules says that the main weapon of the infantry. During the Battle of Personia, the infantry used mostly swords and shields, and one group was armed with long spears. These spears are called suris and were used by the Lemurians several millennia ago. Due to its length of 5 meters, equipping cavalrymen with them is much more effective than giving them swords. Their kingdom is surrounded by deserts, plains, and mountainous areas. Among the enemies, there are nomads and mountain dwellers who have adapted to their terrain. If they are faced with the fact that they can't use weapons because of the terrain, it will be bad. But they can't divide weapons for a certain terrain either. Instead of the same daggers, it is better to use a copy. They should use something 7 meters high to keep the enemy cavalry out of reach, and use shields to protect them from arrows. This distance will be an advantage over the enemy. At the same time, it should be light and not interfere, so as not to destroy the system, and so that the shield can be worn. Hercules asks if there are any such weapons. Everyone is thinking about this request. Dalios asks if it's possible to just use everything at once. Galfes replies that it's easy to say something, but it's impossible to put it into practice. Dalios thinks that if the Emperor asks, then what's left? Hercules shouts that he is right. They will equip the army starting from this. They will train until the performance itself. Angel says that she has heard all this, and so step by step they are preparing. Adrian calls him an arrogant brother and says that he is not up to soul techniques. The angel says that it is possible, but their campaign will fail. Adrian asks what that means. The girl explains to get to the principality. They will go to sea, but the wrath of the spirits will drag them into a storm. Unable to find a way out, they will be swept away by the waves, and eventually they will all drown. Adrian doesn't believe things can go so smoothly, but Angel explains that he surprisingly can. In one of the worlds, the army of a huge kingdom was hit twice by a storm, and then they began to compose legends about the god of the winds. Anyway, Hercules doesn't even know it. Right now, he is gathering an army and preparing to march. Adrian says he doesn't care. The throne he was supposed to inherit. My father continued to protect the country with tradition, all of which he should have inherited. He loved his father more than anyone else, but still, among the heirs, he was the most hated. But his father's vassal, and even the legacy magic, they all chose him. He loved his father's country best of all. He might be a little more capable, but he took absolutely everything from him. My mother, seeing the magic seal, told obey him. Adrian was outraged. He told his father, mother, and the crown that it was all his own. He will kill the one who stole everything from him and get it back for himself. The angel says that it looks like he suffered a lot, but now everything is fine. He is protected by the owner himself. He will soon take his rightful place and lead the empire to prosperity. To do this, she would reward him with something. She hugs him. Adrian asks her to help. He asks if he can really become an emperor. It disappears. He tries to grab it with his hand, but sees that there is nothing there. It seems to him that he dreamed everything, because this is delirium. Where can the archangel come from here? But he sees a scroll on the bed. He does not understand what this piece of paper is, unfolds it, and sees a route map of the principality. Dalios doesn't understand what she's doing here, and then he sees the archangel's feather next to the map. Adrian realizes that this is not a dream, and finally he will be able to knock Hercules out of his place. Enter Hercules' servant. Adrian says that Dominic has arrived on time and asks him to gather an army. Dominic clarifies that he does not mean a tax on the financing of the army. Adrian denies it and says it's not a tax. He says that Hercules is going to march to the Principality of Trabizes. They will attack him as soon as he returns. Dominic asks if Adrian is going to start a riot, but why all of a sudden? He says that he is finally just lucky. Now the Lord God is on his side. He throws open the curtains, pulls them down, and declares that all the filth and bitterness of his life, he will make Hercules feel them and kill him. Hercules says they can perform as planned. He entrusts the final preparations to Christopher and Dalios, who will tell the people that the lost lands will once again be theirs. Christopher says everything will be done. Hercules reports that his brother once tried to kill him. Most likely, it will try again. Caroline squeezes his hand and tells him that she won't let this happen. Hercules grins and says he's not going to make it anyway. I'm sure he still hasn't noticed that he's got everything in the palm of his hand. He goes out to the people. The people welcome him. Adrian is watching all of this. A few days later, Hercules began his plan. Citizens discuss the incident. Someone says that he did not hear anything like this during the conversation of the Council of Elders. Everything is just as the Archangel said. But something is not clear. It was said that this vision came to His Highness Adrian in a dream. He's surprised that he calls him Highness. Dominic apologizes, and Adrian asks him to listen. His father should have chosen him, not Hercules, but him, the favorite of the gods and the true emperor. This message should be compensation for all his suffering, a chance given to him by Archangel Jibril, and he can't miss it. He asks if the same thing hasn't happened to them. If it wasn't for his brother, their situation would have been much better. Dominic agrees with him. Hadrian turns to the Bulgaronian envoy and asks if their trade with Hercules also failed. Bulgaronians are nomadic people, mostly consisting of one race. But there are also elves of royal blood in it. The main trading currency for them is sheep. They are looted from time to time by the Lemurians, all because Hercules is not happy with the terms of trade. They try to explain the situation to Adrian. But Adrian doesn't understand their language, yet he says it's all clear. He claims that he understands them even without words, and he would certainly like to take advantage of their barbarity on the battlefield. Their crash. A man runs into the room and says that there is news. Hercules and an army of 40,000 Lemurians were sunk in the sea by Ardal. Everyone is surprised that it was sunk, just like in the vision. Dominic asks what Adrian will say next. Hadrian realized that it was indeed a message. He turns to people and calls them comrades, says that they are the best of the best, that they did not listen to their brother's speech. At the dawn of his brother's defeat and his dawn, this moment has finally arrived, and he grants honor and glory to each of them. For he is the next emperor. May His Majesty the Emperor be glorified. He can kill Hercules. His people praise him as an emperor. If you rely on the map of the sea routes, Hercules should return to this port. They would meet him on the nearest plateau to the port, and he would throw him from his horse and seize him with his own hands, gouging out his tear-stained eyes, chopping off his head begging for mercy. So Hadrian gathers an army to make Hercules pay for everything before his father's grave. The army is waiting for Hercules. Adrian says he's running late, or else there's a squad so small that it can't be seen. Someone reports that the army of Hercules is approaching. Adrian realizes that this is the only day he would like to meet him. He waits for him to show his smug face. The army of Hercules appears. He rides ahead on a horse. Hercules is followed by a huge army. Adrian wonders why. He doesn't understand where such a huge army comes from. One of his soldiers says they don't know, because according to the report, Most of them should have been left at the bottom of the sea. Adrian says that according to the prediction, they should not look so lively healthy. The Archangel's admonition simply cannot be wrong. They were bound to sink and incur the wrath of the sea spirit. He would never believe that the fastidious sea spirits would like a man like Hercules. The soldier asks that even if he says so now, what can they do? Hercules uses his eye to see Hadrian and the man conversing with him. He says everything is fine. They are nervous. He asks Caroline if she sees it. Caroline says she'll probably refrain. It's a pitiful sight, even without checking the information. His Highness Hadrian checked into the fact that their army had sunk. Edmund declares that it is unfortunate that he has a completely non-thinking brother, which only spoils your blood. This is Edmund Erdmod, Hercules' half-brother. Hercules says that this is their common brother. Edmund apologizes for the slip of the tongue. This Edmund, a half-elf from a military family, is my father's half-brother. During the war with Dalios, he was assigned to guard the capital, but this time it was Galfes who was assigned to protect it. Hercules asks why Hadrian is so different from them, seemingly living in almost identical conditions. Edmund says he'll take it as a compliment. Caroline says that Highness Titus should also be standing here, but he is passionate about something else. He flatly refused when he was given the order of His Highness, because now preparations are underway for the campaign. But Titus said that he didn't care about their wars, that his muse had visited him, and that if he left the brush now, he would be a disgrace to the family. Christopher was asking what if Adrian tried to kill him while he was sitting here. He said that to die with a brush in his hands is the cherished desire of any artist, and he will not go anywhere. In general, he always behaves like this, and Hercules believes that he will not even go to the meeting. All because Christopher is treating him the wrong way. To make it move, you need to do the following. Hercules walks into his room and asks him how about some sketches outside the castle. He agrees to go. Hercules says he is very easily bribed. It seems that he is surrounded only by such brothers. Edmund doesn't even know what to say. But even now, when Titus introduces one of the soldiers of the Imperial army, all he does is continue to draw nonsense. Hercules says that it can't be helped. If he stayed in his castle, there is a high probability that he would have been killed by Hadrian's men. So anyway, one way or another, it will serve him. Hercules feels sorry for Hadrian that he didn't notice anything at all. My father repeatedly bowed his head to the nobles to make him emperor, and my mother broke the ban and bowed her head to him just to make up for him. They loved him the most, so he didn't steal anything from him. He could have become an emperor without making such a mistake. He's sorry that now he has to take the country that his parents loved into their own hands. He says they're going to start cleaning up now. Dalios says that's how they were able to find out about everyone involved in the mutiny. Thanks to this meeting, they can suppress Adrian and all his accomplices, pulling out the infection at the root. To carry out a gradual cleaning, it is better to conduct a full-scale battle once and show that it is better not to stand up against it. Galfes arrives to join the army. Hercules is glad him. He asks how Christopher is doing. Galfes says everything is fine. Only he was upset that he wouldn't be able to personally witness the altercation of his nephews. Hercules laughs and says that he himself is being cautious, even returned to the protection of the castle. We need to finish up as soon as possible and come back with souvenirs and stories. Hadrian turns to Gibril in his mind and asks why this is so. Shouldn't his army have sunk? He hears the girl say that everything is fine. The master is on his side. Adrian is surprised. Without a doubt, this test is given to him by the Lord, and he should easily overcome it. He asks what the size of their army is. His clerk replies that the number of infantrymen reaches 18,000, 2,000 crossbowmen and cavalrymen each, and another 8,000 horsemen in the form of support from Bold Ron. Only about 30,000. Adrian asks what the enemy's troop strength is. He replies that they are located outside the walls of the fort, so it is impossible to calculate the exact number. The regular army consists of about 20,000 infantry and about 10,000 archers and cavalrymen. In total, about 40,000. Adrian says he understands. It turns out that the difference is 10,000, but they have every chance of winning, or rather they will definitely win. They will end up on this plateau. His general asks him to wait. Some say that you should avoid fighting on the plateau. Adrian asks who else he is. He says his name is Oscar Alman. He asks me to think again and calls him their majesty. The general of his army whispers to him that Oscar is the second son of the Alman family. The Almans have long owned the vast southern lands of Missour. They are a strong economic pillar for the entire empire. With such huge financial power, the long-eared race is jealous of them. However, the Almans also have a similar feeling towards the elves. In the past, these factions have often clashed in debates and even fights. And for now, the Almans have joined the so-called Hadrian's Wing. Unfortunately for Oscar, Alman's second son, he was introduced as an advisor to Adrian. He is surprised, because he is not even from the main branch and he, completely nameless, will advise him something. However, it all depends on what he says. Oscar says he understands everything. At the moment, they and the enemy forces are almost equal. But the enemy General Galfes, who personally trains and commands the army. All fighters are elite. The most dangerous enemy is considered heavy cavalry. As for their army, it is a motley one and has many problems, such as interaction. In addition, they are clad in the armor of the previous generation, which they are not used to. Adrian says that in this case, he doesn't see any problems, but Oscar says that it's not just that. According to Lady Gibril's prediction, the army of Hercules should have sunk, but they see a completely different picture. The enemy is prepared and ready for battle. In this regard, he has a bad feeling, as if they have lured them into a trap. They have much more chances if they fight from the fortress instead of on the plateau, so he asks Adrian to think again. He grabs Oscar by the front of his shirt and asks him what he even understands, and how dare he tell him, the Emperor, to hide in the fortress. He had suffered enough humiliation from his brother, and even if it was the purest plateau, he would make it eat the earth, and he, the seedless one, must not dare to order him, the Emperor. He pushes Oscar aside and tells him that if he's got it all figured out, he should scram back to his seat. Oscar stands up. He asks for forgiveness, and Adrian declares that they were blessed by God himself and demands not to lose their fighting spirit. Oscar leaves and thinks that Adrian will not live. Hercules will definitely win. He should think of something to get their troops out. It had been 3 days since Hercules' army and Hadrian's army had met. Both sides have completed the construction of fortifications. During all this time, there was not a single provocation towards the army of Hercules. No shooting archers, no throwing stones. War is coming, but the stagnation on the battlefield continues. An outpost of the army of Hercules. With the help of the all-seeing eye, Hercules examines the enemy's army. Dalios says there's about 30 grand in there, and Adrian's pretty well prepared. Hercules says that they are still aristocrats. It is not a problem for them to gather such an army. In their empire, the aristocracy also has a certain number of warriors. If you compare this empire with another, it is extremely unsafe. Even after fighting off the robbers' attack once, it is impossible to eradicate them. Most of those who own property have protective equipment with them, so it's pretty obvious why the aristocracy has mercenaries. Unlike a mercenary like Dalios, aristocrats have long held possessions here and there. The main house has its vassals, the branch house has its vassals, and so on. If you combine their power together, you can get a really strong army, which is why he doesn't like aristocrats. Through connection and blood, they inherit power. Blood ties are a huge power obtained out of nowhere. To give up such power is like giving up an innate talent bestowed by God. Dalios says it applies to him, too. Hercules agrees with him, but these blood ties turn to ordinary red water if they start to rot. The noble blue blood is simply devalued. He wants to give that bond back to God in the here and now. He asks the others what they will say if they don't think so. Galfes sees the Bulgaronians coming towards them, along with Carolina. He's surprised. Aren't they on the enemy's side? What are they doing here? Hercules says it was he who called them. The Bulgarian troops are masters of looting, and their advantage in open combat is dwindling. The fact that they were openly engaged in battle seems strange to him, so he sent a messenger to them. The fact that they are now in front of them is proof of that. He turns to their young general and asks him to tell them everything. He is surprised that Hercules knows their language. Hercules replies that if you search, it's not so hard to find a personal teacher. They will be good friends and allies, and it is not proper for an emperor not to know their language. Doesn't he think so? He asks if this is the real emperor of Lemuria. He notices that he is very young. Hercules invites him to go into the tent, and tells Galphes that the rest is up to him. He obeys. Hercules says that this time he thinks to turn a blind eye to what he saw. Reincarnates asks what it means to close your eyes. Hercules invites him to the table and offers to make an agreement. He sits down. Hercules explains that the agreement is divided into 4 parts. Mutual attack is prohibited, the launch of official trade routes, the Bulgaronian king is obliged to supply troops at the request of the emperor, and Lemuria will pay an annual tax to Bulgarin. The Bulgaronian studies the document. Hercules says they are a nomadic people. If they continue to give up farming, life will not improve, and maintaining health with meat alone is clearly not the case. To start farming, you need technology, grain, and so on. To get them, you need to either rob or start trading. In this case, they decided to use the battle for the throne to loot what they needed, and if Hadrian couldn't get on the throne, did they really think that he would compromise with them later? The Bulgaronian is surprised, but Hercules continues. He says that they are allies and will consider that they just stumbled. The Bulgaronian wonders how far he can calculate their actions. He agrees. He will sign the agreement and the Bulgaronians will no longer participate in this war. He wonders who this guy is. Unlike its predecessor, it feels terrible pressure. It is a penetrating gaze that knows literally everything. So now they are bound by convention. The Bulgaronian thinks that one wrong move and he will simply devour them. Hercules asks the Bulgarian friends to disappear now. Andrian sees that the Bulgarian army is breaking the formation. He demands that they do not dare to do this. A soldier rides up to him, bringing a message from the messenger of Bulgarin. He says they have made an agreement with the Lemurian army and are pulling out of this war. Adrian is furious. He knew that these damned nomads couldn't be trusted, that everyone was trying to betray him. He asks why, and beats up the messenger. Then he laughs and says it's only getting more interesting. It's all good. God is on his side. This is the test that will take him to the throne. The difference is only 10,000. It's nothing. He will defeat Hercules. Lady Gibril told him that the future of Lemuria was in his hands. He just can't lose, so stop throwing stones. It's time to take up arms. Hercules observes that the Bulgaronians have fulfilled part of the agreement. This is good. Unlike the personal armies of aristocrats, which are difficult to command, the Bulgarian army is a national one, and the level of command is completely different. Now the main obstacle is eliminated. Hercules says it's time for their fight with Hadrian. He commands everyone to take their places. You need to destroy the traitor. Adrian immediately gives the same command. He believes that God is on his side, and he must destroy the false emperor. The troops converge in battle. Thousands of arrows are flying in both directions. The battle continues. Arrows descend on enemy troops. Both troops summon wind spirits, asking them to dance in the wake of the arrows. Then they let the heavy cavalry charge forward. Edmund and Caroline see that Hercules has signaled and rush forward. Hadrian demands that his army do not hesitate and demolish the cavalry of Hercules to smithereens. Hercules also tells his army to crush Hadrian's army. Adrian asks the wind to grant him protection. He lashes out at a false emperor warrior and demands that the wind spirits show the power of their empire. He summons the spirit of Ammon. The strongest wind begins with fire. The soldiers are in a panic. Adrian calls them weaklings and says they can't stand up to his thundering footsteps. Ahead of him, he sees Edmund and Caroline, calls him a traitor and a servant of the false emperor. Mr. Edmund tells Caroline that he will go ahead. He hasn't been on the battlefield for a long time, so he wants to get some exercise. Caroline turns back. Adrian sees the girl running away. He commands her to deal with the old man and then rush after her. Edmund says it's unfortunate. It's not right to call a man an old man who has lived a little longer than you. The soldiers ask him what he is talking about, and Edmund says that he will start with them, point out the place for these ignoramuses. He invokes the spirit of Andromalius. The soldiers are amazed at what they saw. The ability of the Andromalius spirit summoned by Edmont to steal things from people in a random order and a certain radius maximum of 300. Soldiers find themselves without spears or helmets. They demand their return. Some don't have guns. Then Caroline enters the fray. She summons the spirit of Oligos and says it's her turn. Edmund thinks it's great. She made a contract with the strongest spirit, Illigos. Carolina is a beautiful knight, and he is happy to fight alongside her. In Edmund's hands are Caroline's underpants. Edmund says they will return them after the fight. Andromalius steals mostly weapons and armor, but occasionally comes across other things. Dalios, watching the battle with Hercules from the battlements, says that Hercules' army is strong. He explains that all this is due to the fact that he spent a lot of time training. He originally wanted to send the halberdiers to the front lines, but the enemy sent the crossbowmen to the vanguard. It's pointless to send halberdiers even with shields against them. He wanted to try it out sometime, but he gave up on the idea. Dalios believes that this is a wise decision, and he is confident that there will be many more opportunities. Dalios asks where Titus is. By the way, Hercules points his finger and says he's there. An unprecedented beast appears in the crowd of soldiers. They shoot at him, but it's no use. Someone shouts out what kind of monster it is. Titus says it's fine and demands to chop them all up. He himself rejoices in his creation. The soldiers ask him to keep his head down because arrows are flying. He asks them to protect him, and he proceeds with their next creation. The spirit of Titus Decembrius. The juices released by this spirit give life to paintings. The next one will be a bird, which must cut the traitors with its claws. He draws it, drips juice on it, and a two-headed eagle takes off from his picture. Titus commands his beautiful creation to fly forward. The eagle rushes at the enemy's army. Titus says he hasn't summoned a spirit in a long time. Despite the fatigue, the paintings are simply beautiful, and there is no better feeling than reviving your work. The soldiers keep demanding that he hide from the arrows. They are surprised that he has paper in his hands. If that's the case, then no problem. Titus is angry that his art is being mocked. Dalios asks if he's sure he's going to be okay. Hercules explains that Titus' spirit is quite useful, but not particularly hardy. He thinks it's only enough for a couple more paintings. Adrian is outraged. He shouts as he dares. Edmund isn't a threat in and of himself, but this little brat is in the way, and he wants Titus killed at least. He can't even use a spirit anymore, so why is he still alive? Crossbowmen won't last long. In that case, everyone should go ahead. Hercules sees that their foot soldiers have begun to move. They must also act. He demands that Titus be taken to the fortress and that the crossbowmen disperse and retreat. The halberdiers advance. As planned, Hercules entrusted the right flag to Dalios. He asks if he knows what to do. He answers in the affirmative. Hercules prepares for the moment to look at his brother's stupid face. Adrian thinks his brother's drums are already getting on his nerves. Hadrian wonders what Hercules is up to. The battle has entered its final stage. Who will emerge victorious? Hercules requires archers to take turns retreating from both sides, either covering the retreat as well or allowing the enemy to pass. Hadrian commands the archers to run the march, the halberdiers to hold the formation, and the spearmen to cover the flanks and help hold the formation. Both command the attack. The soldiers claim that they cannot advance. Hercules simply wanted to keep the army strong and keep his men from advancing. He understood. Hadrian orders the light cavalry to go to protect the infantry. He will not allow Hercules to break through. He calls upon the spirit of Ammon again. Garphys appears with the cavalry. Adrian gets angry. He shouts to Garphys that even if his father thought highly of him, but how could he prefer his stupid brother to him over the eldest son of the Julians? Oscar thinks about how that idiot Adrian is giving bad commands one after another. Judging from the movements of Hercules' army, it seems that he is moving towards their flank and is planning to encircle them. Looking at the current formation of their army, Hadrian's army is playing to the tune of Hercules, in which case they will lose to his army. He thinks about what to do. Arrows fly around him. He shields himself from them, and his servant falls. Oscar asks the servant if he can get up. There are many privates here, subordinates of the Almond House. He can't allow the Almond family to be interrupted here. He must save everyone. They will definitely return alive. His servant stands next to him, and the soldiers of the army of Hercules rush at them. Hadrian doesn't understand what's going on. The soldiers don't move, but the enemy doesn't show any desire to move forward either. Even the archers don't shoot. He doesn't know where they're going, but then he notices something. He thinks it can't be. It's a formation. He demands that his soldiers retreat. He does not understand how this happened. Dalios reports that they've taken out all the light cavalry. Hercules says it's great. I think Hadrian finally understood. Once upon a time, there was an old general. This legendary general is said to have passed through the prefab ridges, working his way across half the continent and cornering Lemurii, and became known for his strategy. Many have tried to apply this winning strategy, but without a proper understanding of the true nature of this strategy, they have all met with painful defeat. This strategy is based on several details: the difference in the number of cavalrymen, the combat power of the soldiers, and an exceptionally capable commander. These three conditions must be met. The use of incredible tactics based on the speed of movement of the army lead to great results. Truly, this is a strategy worth taking to the grave. Full encirclement strategy, they are all surrounded. Hadrian demands to quickly break through the defense. Hercules realizes that he will attack by archers. Archers shoot arrows that hit the target. Hadrian can't believe that his entire army is dying. This strategy of complete encirclement is a plan for guaranteed victory, so it is incredibly difficult to achieve. And in the first place, the difference in numbers that can be achieved by removing the Bulgarian cavalry, which is a real threat. They were able to provide favorable conditions for removing the Bulgaronians from the battlefield without casualties and a reward, exactly the result he had hoped for. Fortunately, they cancelled their mercenary contracts, expanded the permanent Imperial army, and trained them thoroughly. The Lemurian Imperial army certainly had a hard time relying on unpredictable mercenaries to fight off the Bulgaronians in the past. He was only able to implement this encirclement strategy because he carefully selected his generals. Choosing the right weapon is also a crucial factor in this battle. They couldn't outsmart the enemy soldiers if they had spades. It would be the same if he equipped all the soldiers with halberds. They wouldn't be able to fend off the enemy soldiers. In other words, you need to take the most suitable weapons to get a strong army. And the last piece of the puzzle is Dalios. He can't give out complex orders to an army of 200,000 men on his own, and it's undeniable that just because he's entrusted half of the army under his command, they can use an encirclement strategy. Rebuilding an army from scratch, improving the combat capabilities of warriors, removing foreign forces from the battlefield, which allows a competent general to completely dominate the battlefield. Someone asks for his life. He promises to pay any amount that Hercules says. He says that he is a vassal of one of the 70 sacred nobles. If he dies, their houses will not be silent, but immediately falls down killed. Hercules' army continues to destroy Hadrian's army. There is panic among the soldiers. Someone asks them to step back. Someone demands not to push, because they can't get out of the encirclement. Someone advises that if he is a nobleman, let him do something and start negotiations with Hercules. Hercules, standing on the fortress wall, rejoices. He laughs and asks if they can see it with their own eyes. Isn't he right? He calls out to Hadrian and says that he is really grateful to him for this. Thanks to him, he can repeat this incredible strategy from the legends with his own hands. Let him be a little brother. He is grateful to him for being such an obedient brother. Dalios thinks that it's been about 1,000 years since an encirclement strategy was devised, and the number of people who tried to copy it and failed is countless. Now, in front of him, a guy who was barely 15 years old had successfully dealt with it. The average lifespan of elves is 200 years. This means that His Majesty is still waiting for 185 years of experience. He says he is looking forward to the future. Hercules asks what he's talking about. Dalios says nothing, just thinking out loud. Now, the only thing left to do was to cut them off so that they couldn't break through. You don't need to lower your security. Hercules says that he knows, but it's still hard to maintain the environment strategy. It's like filling your skin with water to the limit. Dalios explains that in this position, as long as the arrows fall on them, He doesn't think there is a competent commander who can calm the panicked soldiers and unite them to break through the formation. Hercules says it doesn't matter. As long as there is no worthy commander among them, they will never get out of the encirclement. Not a single fly will escape from their trap. They see one of the generals break through the encirclement. This is Oscar, declaring that House Almond will not be defeated today. He commands forward. His soldiers, covering the sides with shields, break through the defenses. A soldier of the Lemurian army commands you to restore your formation faster and not let anyone escape. Hercules asks Dalios if he could break through the encirclement on his own. Dalios replies that if he's lucky, there's a 1 in 100 chance he'll get out alive. Hercules agrees with him. He thinks that the chance is 1 in 100 given. But this is not what would decide the outcome of the battle. Besides, it would leave a stain on his reputation. Dalios reports that even a great general of the Imperial army has abandoned the battlefield a couple of times, which is not something to be ashamed of. Hercules asks Dalios to take a look. It seems that they've just found another outstanding talent. Hercules' attention is drawn to Oscar. Most of the nobles under Hadrian's leadership were destroyed by a hail of arrows, surrounded by Hercules' forces. As for those who led the mercenaries, who stayed behind, who didn't take part in the battle, but raised funds for the army, they were all arrested by Christopher's men. As for Hadrian, the leader of the rebellion, he escaped. He came to the kingdom of Balgarin to seek asylum. The ruler of Balgarin orders him captured. Hadrian doesn't understand what's going on. He demands to be released, asks what the hell they're up to. They say something to him, but he does not understand anything and demands that they speak in such a way that he understands. Back then, there was a Balgaronian speaking in a clear language that even if he did, he himself would be aware of what was going on. While trying to find refuge in the kingdom of Balgarin, Hadrian was arrested and handed over to the Lemurian court. Thus Hadrian's plan to usurp the throne failed miserably. The army of Hercules suffered the following losses. Foot soldiers died 1,000, left 18,200. 200 horsemen were killed, 9,400 will remain. 100 archers were killed, 19,500 remained. The remaining army 37,100 army. Andriana is completely dead, and there are 0 remaining troops. So, the traitor to the throne, Hadrian, was brought to justice. On the 3rd day after the suppression of the uprising, Hadrian, the leader of the uprising, as well as hundreds of other conspirators, will be sentenced for their crimes. One of the rebels is brought to the emperor's throne. Hercules asks you to answer briefly and clearly why he took part in the uprising. He replies that he did it to protect His Majesty Hercules from danger from within. Hercules asks that if this is so, then why did he proclaim Hadrian emperor? He doesn't know what to say. Hercules grins and says it's probably because he was dragged along, isn't it? The nobles who had more power and power than he did had tricked him into getting their hands on his fortune and his soldiers. Hercules asks if the person responsible knows, even though it looks like he's just trying to trick him. The prisoner agrees. He claims that he was tricked. Hercules asks who it was. He tries to tell the name of the person who deceived him, but does not have time to finish. Garfies thinks he's saving his own skin by shifting the blame to the more powerful aristocrats. If he valued his life so much, he should have joined His Majesty right away instead of kneeling down right now. Hercules says that if he is really one of the participants in the rebellion, he will be executed along with his family. However, his family has served the Giuliano's family faithfully for many years, and he can't turn a blind eye to it. Hercules announces that this man, as the head of the family, is sentenced to 30 years of hard labor. His family, vassals, and their families will be looked after personally, and that's all. The man thanks their highness from the bottom of his heart, promising never to forget mercy for the rest of his life. They're taking him away. Hercules says that he has no doubt that in 3 years no one will remember about it. He calls the next one. He asks another nobleman that he must have been deceived. He had asked the same question to all the lower nobles and thus obtained a legitimate reason to commute the sentence. There were several reasons for this. First, you can't just execute all the aristocrats. During the rebellion, they crushed many noble houses and eventually their influence faded away. The resulting void in power would open up opportunities for the lesser houses, who would surely take advantage of it and gain influence to take over the positions of the former great houses. Reason number 2. As he has already said, having lost any remaining influence, the nobility is no longer a threat to imperial power. They had lost everything in the rebellion, and even without his help, their former strength would only have one name left. It is for this reason that a sentence of imprisonment, fine and forced labor will be a reasonable solution. There is a third and final reason. He calls for the next one of the key figures on Hadrian's side. He had considerable influence in the political arena, the highest aristocrat and part of the half-elven nobility. He is aware of his situation and believes that they will not dare to execute him. Why is that? Because he gave him a written apology, and even if everyone present in the court is a member of the imperial court, there are those who owe him a debt of gratitude, and with their support, he can get away with it. Being confident in my safety, he knows that in this situation I will have to resort to drastic measures. It's Hans, the cocky fool. He asks their majesties' permission to explain himself and says that several charges have been brought against him, and he is being sentenced to the imperial ban. From this moment on, he is deprived of his noble status. Hans is startled. He begs Hercules to wait, to cancel his decree. Hercules continues that he will be isolated for the rest of his days after his demise. His remains will be set on fire. His suffering will be eternal. He shouts that only not so. They can't do this. He is a high noble. How dare they treat him like a rabble? He asks just to kill him and let him die with honor. But this is denied to him. Hercules says that's all and invites the next one. From the very beginning, his target was the upper houses of the nobility. In short, he wanted to punish the normally untouchable high nobles. By making them responsible for the actions of the lower nobles, he ensured that those present in the courtroom didn't dare challenge his decision. In addition, the nobles who had to surrender their recent allies would no longer dare to oppose him in the future. If he starts a coup, there is no guarantee that he will keep his life, even if he decides to join forces with other houses. One of the main objectives of this performance is to allow the junior nobles to see the full picture of the event. Imprisonment and confiscation of property for the lower nobles, and the imperial bank for the higher nobles. This method allowed him to rid the Lemurian imperial court of a couple dozen great houses. Finally, Adrian is brought in. Christopher pushes him to bow before the emperor. He is outraged. Christopher asks him to shut his mouth because he is standing in front of His Majesty the Emperor. Hercules says they haven't seen each other for a long time. So when was the last time they had a face-to-face conversation? Or maybe it's the first time. He had only heard of it from his friend Lord Dominic, and that poisoned melon was probably his idea. Thanks to this, he saw for the first time how the poison affected Silver. It was amazing. The dish, by the way, was also wonderful. Salted melon, sweet tomatoes, and poison, what an exquisite combination. But he didn't eat it, so he probably doesn't know. The battle on the plain will clearly go down in history in many ways, of course, thanks to the use of tactics of complete encirclement. I'm willing to bet that he's the only one who has successfully applied this strategy in several hundred years. He asks Hadrian if he realizes that before the Bulgarian cavalry left the battlefield, they had an excellent chance of winning an open battle, and with the support of Bulgarian and the mercenaries they gathered, they might even be able to win. Hadrian says that Hercules is not worthy of the imperial throne. He was supposed to succeed to the throne after his father, who kept saying that, but from the moment Hercules was born, his father gave him everything, him a brat with no right to the throne. He turns to the court and says that they are all fooled by this false emperor. You can't let him sit on this throne any longer. This is a prophecy sent down to him by the great archangel Gabriel himself. He was chosen by God himself. He is the rightful emperor of the great Lemurian Empire. Someone asks him again if he told Gabrielle, if it was the archangel, who no one saw, who revealed herself to His Majesty Adrian. He claims that he is telling the truth. He has a feather from her wing as proof. Hercules says that he understands everything, and since Adrian says so, he asks to invite Gabrielle to this hall. If he can, Hercules will recognize him as the true emperor in front of everyone present. Adrian laughs and says that Hercules will regret this. He calls Lady Gabrielle, says it's time to tell everyone the truth about the false emperor. He asks to send the scumbag Hercules to the depths of hell, but nothing happens. Adrian doesn't know how. Hercules calls out to him, but Adrian asks him to wait a minute. It will definitely appear. He shouts again and calls for Lady Gabrielle. He says he is here and asks her to please show up, but no one shows up. Hercules says that he has only 3 conditions, and if the older brother meets them, he will live. First, you must swear loyalty and unconditional obedience to your emperor. The second is to recognize the illegal invasion of its territory, and the third is to accept responsibility for the actions of the great nobles. Then he could spare his life, as their precious mother had wished. Hadrian calls Hercules, His Majesty the Emperor, and says that he acknowledges responsibility for what happened and begs him for mercy. Hercules says it's a wise decision. He announces the verdict of the accused Adrian Julianos, the leader of the rebellion. By this decree, has sentenced to life imprisonment. Hercules asks the guards to take his brother back to the dungeon. Adrian has a pair of scissors in his hand. He cuts the ropes with them, breaks free, and rushes at Hercules, shouting that he is about to die. But Hercules is being shut down by Garfies and Christopher. Adrian sees Gabrielle appear in front of him. She says you can't do that. Adrian is startled. He asks why Lady Gabrielle is protecting this impostor, since she said that he is the true emperor. Everyone looks at Adrian, but all they see is him talking to someone. People don't understand what he's doing or who he's talking to. Gabrielle laughs and says that she never talked about the murder. She says that he is an impostor and he will never become the emperor, no matter how hard he tries. Adrian asks her what she's talking about. He was chosen by the gods, wasn't he? Ta says no, it can't be true, and asks if he wants to know why. She's a demon, let him know. This is the demon that Hercules has a contract with. She wishes Adrian luck. He again rushes to Hercules, calls him the devil, and asks him to return the crown to him. Garfies says the freak is completely blown away. Christopher informs them that under no circumstances should they mention this before His Majesty's grave. The demon congratulates Hercules. Thus, all the culprits were punished, so that the festive banquet passed without any problems. Finally, Oscar is brought to him. Hercules asks if he knows why he's here. Oscar says that he is asking for their mercy for drawing his sword against him. He is ready to take any punishment. Hercules explains that he misunderstood everything. He's not going to judge him. It's all because of the old guys. He asks to stop already intimidating Oscar. He has a suggestion for him. He offers Oscar to become a general. Oscar is surprised. He asks what Hercules wanted to say because he fought against his country. Hercules says he's been watching him and the Almond House for a long time. However, since the head of their house sided with Hadrian in the struggle for the throne, he had to be arrested and deprived of his lands and rank. When the head of their house decided to side with Hadrian, he had to follow him. He had no choice. Thus, he found himself on board a ship going to the bottom. For this reason, his house also fell under the distribution. He greatly influenced the outcome of the war. Oscar says that in any case, in order for him to be a general, I am sure that there are even more suitable candidates. Christopher asks him what he's even talking about. He asks Oscar if he was the one who managed to escape from the encirclement. Oscar asks if Hercules really saw it. He replies that, of course, he saw it. The banding tactic was designed to sow panic in the enemy ranks, depriving them of their ability to resist. But Oscar broke out of the ring on the first attempt. Being inside the ring under the onslaught of enemy forces, he kept calm and thus was able to save the lives of his subordinates. Under different circumstances, anyone else would have decided it was impossible. He highly appreciates his quality as a leader. A mighty army needs outstanding generals. With it, their country's army will become even stronger. He also believes that this is a great opportunity for him to restore the honor and glorious name of his house. Oscar says he is very grateful to their majesties. House Alman is deeply indebted to him and at the emperor's disposal, and they will do anything for the future of their country. Most members of the Alman family were stripped of their nobility and sent to prison. Despite the fact that they escaped capital punishment, the imprisonment broke the head of their house. Because of this incident, the house was badly damaged. If he agreed to His Majesty's offer, he would have the opportunity to restore House Alman to its former glory. Besides, after all that had happened, His Majesty had personally invited him to join him. He turned a blind eye to all of his family's crimes and recognized him as worthy of his trust. Oscar says that he may not have enough experience, but he asks to take care of it. Hercules hopes that he will work well with these old men. Oscar agrees. It's finally over. In the evening, they gather for dinner. Caroline and Hercules are sitting at the table. Hercules says that's for sure. Right after he dealt with his father's former vassal countries, his older brother immediately rebelled. Who would have thought that the emperor would have so many worries? But thanks to this, after such work, all the food seems especially delicious. Carolina says the chef has really come alive lately. She was so glad to hear that Nal had been able to influence the chief. Hercules asks why she talks about others when they are finally alone. Carolina says that this is not what she had in mind. She has also been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. He looks at her very carefully. Carolina asks what happened, and Oscar says that he understood why she chose such a revealing outfit. He still can't forget how much she blushed in her maid outfit. She says she is, because she is his mistress, after all. Is it strange to want to give to the person you love? Hercules laughs and says that a mistress is just fine when they would go on a second date. The rose garden opens in a month. The chariot races will also start soon, and they will have a lot to do. And then you can spend the whole day together without getting out of bed. Carolina reminds him that the next month will be full of meetings and inspections, and he will not be able to just forget about his duties. The empire in its current position has only slightly strengthened its position. Since his father's time, they still have a lot of problems to solve. It is necessary to improve relations with neighboring countries, reassign generals and rebuild the Imperial army, solve the problem of hunger and unemployment, and manage the newly united territories. A lot of time will be spent only on the western and eastern factions. He wonders if his life will be long enough to deal with all this. Carolina says that she is confident that everything will work out. He has already achieved a lot, and in general, when you need support, she will always be here to listen to him. He says he can probably thank her in advance. She asks him again what he means. Hercules asks her to become his wife. She's surprised. Oscar breaks off a vine branch, makes a ring out of it, and puts it on Caroline's hand. He declares his love for her and wants her to become his wife, and together they will build a bright future for this country. Carolina agrees. Here is an emperor who was able to inspire new life in the Lemurian Empire, which was once on the verge of falling into the abyss that spanned 3 continents. His name is Hercules I. His exploits, his reign under the title of Emperor of Divine Light, the story of an emperor who conquered 3 continents continues right now.